interest rate, motherfucker! Well, you're paying too much, you ignorant son of a bitch! Interest isn't like cheeseburgers. Double ain't a good thing. That's why I use onefmc.com. First Family Mortgage, my friends Bruce Prichard and Conrad Thompson can help you get a lower monthly payment, consolidate debt, get cash out, make home improvements, even skip your next 2 house payments. That's right, skip your next 2 house payments. You don't need perfect credit, you don't need money out of pocket or a tennis racket. Just 10 minutes right now at 888-425-0105 or onefmc.com. Double cheese, double onions, extra mayo, double savings, half the interest, extra service, onefmc.com. NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender.
Have you or someone you know been diagnosed with mesothelioma? You probably have many questions, such as, what should I do? Where can I get more information? RGT4Law.com can answer those questions and help you get the money you deserve. Call 855-RGT4Law or visit RGT4Law.com and fill out the simple form for a free consultation. Robert Taylor, R.G. Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
The following program is an MLWRadio.com production.
And now, something to wrestle with. Con Bruce Prichard. The second most recognized athlete in the entire world today. Conrad Thompson.
What happened when? What would Vince say about that?
Well,
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard, and man, you guys are getting a lot of wrestling this week. Of course, on Monday, you had What Happened When Monday with Tony Schiavone. This week, we recapped Halloween Havoc 1993. Did a little fun commentary with Tony there, and it's available now at MLWRadio.com. But on Wednesday, you got a bonus show. What's all this bonus show talk about? Well, we asked you guys to go to podsurvey.com/wrestle. And if we got enough surveys completed, we would go ahead and throw you a bonus show. If we got more than that, well, we would give you a second bonus show. We'd love to have your support. If you haven't already, please cruise over to podsurvey.com/wrestle. This past Wednesday, a couple of days ago now, you got a Q&A episode. If you aren't already, follow us on Twitter. And the next time something like this happens, you'll get to ask your question to Bruce. He's on Twitter at Bruce Prichard. I'm on Twitter at Hey It's Conrad. And of course, our show account is at Prichard Show. And stay tuned. At the end of today's episode, we're going to give you 4 brand new topics. What might we talk about next week? Well, you get to decide. Stay tuned. At the end of this episode, we'll give you those topics. And of course, you can vote at Prichard Show on Twitter. But before we get into what won this week's poll, Mr. Jim Cornette, let's go ahead and put a bow on last week's episode. Bruce, Owen Hart, the King of Hearts, one of our most requested episodes. And I got really, really positive feedback from this show. A little bit of controversial decision-making by us, according to some, that we didn't talk about the end of Owen's life, but I thought it was a fitting tribute. Let's talk about all the good stuff. And I feel like we did a pretty good job of that. What did you think?
I choose to only remember the good stuff and don't really want to go back and rehash and talk about personal things that I wasn't a part of. And Owen Hart was somebody that I loved and adored when he was with us, and got nothing bad to say about the man. So I didn't choose to go back and rehash a bunch of negative stuff and things that's been covered by a lot of folks over the years. And that's that.
Lots of comments on Twitter about, I guess it was something that was done on house shows where they teased that Owen had beaten Brett and won the world title. So there's a couple of pictures out there floating of Owen carrying the winged eagle. Was there ever any serious consideration in 94 of putting the belt on Owen?
There was talk about it. We talked about what if scenarios with Owen and Brett during that summer, because the match at WrestleMania 10 had been so good that we thought, hey, what if? Is this something we could do? But didn't get past that.
Ultimately, why didn't Vince pull the trigger on that, do you think?
I just think other things came along and other things that he felt would be bigger and more box office.
We did get an email from Smith Hart, a member of the Hart family, and he did have a correction. Maybe you need to go ahead and acknowledge.
Yeah, I guess I inadvertently had said on the podcast last week that it was Keith Hart that had passed when, in fact, it was Dean Hart. And that was just a Freudian slip on my part. Didn't realize I did it. And I do know that, unfortunately, it was Dean that passed, and that was who I was referencing when talking about Owen and whatever you asked me about at WrestleMania, Owen's first ever WrestleMania. So that was that, and Smith was kind enough to reach out to us and correct me, and it's ironic that the only person that brought that to our attention was Smith Hart. So thank you for that, Smith. I appreciate you clarifying that, and that was my mistake. That was my bad, and just a Freudian slip that I didn't even realize I said.
And you sound a lot better this week. Kudos to you for soldiering through last week. I know it wasn't the easiest show to get through. I
was doing the whole thing. I was trying, one of the
lots of tweets about this.
Well, yeah, everybody wanted me to do more Johnny Ace, so I thought a whole show of Johnny Ace.
Well, we're gonna have you do a whole show of Jim Cornette here in just a minute. We took a pass last week on talking about all of the Hart family infighting and situations and craziness that existed after Owen's life, but Smith Hart did send us a note, so I'm going to share that with everyone here. Much was made about Owen not enjoying wrestling. The fact is, Owen loved wrestling. He loved everything about wrestling. Unfortunately, his wife Martha hated wrestling from the day they met. So he always downplayed his love of wrestling to her and always told her it was just a job to make money to keep her happy. Subsequently, it should be noted that no one in my family has ever seen or heard from Martha since Owen's funeral. My parents never even saw their grandchildren afterwards until the day they died. So we said we weren't going to get into this, but since we did hear it directly from a family member, well, I thought I should just pass that information along. Take it for what you will. We certainly appreciate Smith Hart listening to the show and then reaching out to go ahead and offer some footnotes for last week's Owen Hart episode, which is available in the archives now. Of course, we're not going to comment on anything Martha related. And to be clear, we did get some rumor and innuendo that we didn't talk about the end of Owen's life last week because you were under some sort of legal obligation not to say anything in regards to that. Go ahead and clarify that.
No, absolutely not. It's just something that I don't choose to discuss. I don't feel that it's appropriate, and it is something that I was there for. I lived it. I don't want to relive it. And it was a horrible, horrible experience. And you know what? I will say this. Fuck you. To the people that it's like, well, tell us about the worst moments of your life. I've shared some things, some very personal things on this show, and it's not easy, and it's difficult sometimes to share that stuff, and I just it infuriates the hell out of me at times when we are public figures. We are out here in the public. We put ourselves out here. So I'm open to all your criticism, whatever it is that you want to say about me or anything else. However, at the same time, I am entitled to my feelings and my private thoughts. And if there's something I don't want to share, then, hey, at least give me the respect of, I'm saying I don't want to share it, so I'm not going to share it. It was a horrible, horrible, horrible experience that I lived. And if for those of you who have lost someone very near and dear to you, imagine it taking place in front of your very eyes and then trying to share that on a national stage.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people really realize this, so it is worth mentioning here, and I know you're not gonna, but I'll just say it. A lot of people say, oh, well, you talked about Kurt Hennig passing away, or Brian Pillman passing away, or Rick Rude, and the rumor and innuendo. Okay, I hear you on that. Bruce was ringside when his friend passed away. He's right there. So there's lots of criticism about why we won't do this and why we won't do that. We're not under a legal obligation. Bruce, do you work for WWE?
Nope.
Did you have to sign some sort of gag order about this situation? So none of that exists. This is all make-believe fantasy land. And when we're just giving you, man, the gun blue truth, fucking take it or leave it. But there it is. You know, the reality is a man lost a person who was really close to him in front of him, 18 inches from him. And now you want us to just sell it? We're not going to do that. You know, we want to have fun on this show. This is a show where we try to get hashtag Kamala's penis trending. You know, that's kind of what we're trying to do. Now, along the way, we'll tell you some real stuff, but if something's too real, and Bruce has never said, hey man, that's too real. I don't want to do that one until now. We got to give him that. We talk about when he's fired. No problem. Not just the first time, but the second time. We talk about when other friends in his life have passed away. That happened in a hotel room. That happened at their house. It didn't happen within arm's reach. It's different. Give him that. On the other side of the break, we're going to give you some Jim Cornette. So didn't mean for this to get the way it was, but I did want to at least acknowledge it. And, there's no fun way for me to transition to what I'm going to do here that I normally would. So you know what's coming. I'm going to press the button now. You're going to hear it. We'll be back in 30 seconds. You get all the Jim Cornette you could ever need. Just throw it in your Google machine. He's done 912 shoots. All 912 are hilarious. He has not one, but 2 podcasts right here on the MLW Radio Network. But also 2, he has participated in a lot of books, but I don't know that he's written like a real memoir, so to speak, on his whole career.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, really, Conrad, when we think about it, who the hell has time to read books these days?
Well, Audible makes books enjoyable for everyone. Even better, though, you get to enjoy Audible when you're on the go. They have a free app that works on iPhones, iPads, Androids, Kindle Fires, and pretty much anywhere you can enjoy MP3s. And maybe best of all, you own it. It's your book with Audible.
Yeah, not only can you access your books at any time or anywhere right on your smartphone, they even have a great listen guarantee. So if you decide you aren't happy with the book, just exchange it for another title at any time, no questions asked.
So Bruce, I'm in sales. My favorite book over with Audible is Psychology of Selling by Brian Tracy. What's your favorite Audible book, Bruce?
Spanish for Dummies with Audible, or as my good friend Dave Silva would say, Spanish for Dummies con Audible.
Is this a rip?
No, yeah, but here's the deal, Conrad. Do you have the same old commute? Let traffic crawl with your pulse, it just races? You can make more time, but you can make the most of it. Turn your commute into something more with a free trial at Audible. Go to audible.com/Bruce to start now. That's audible.com/Bruce. And guess what?
What's what?
It's free.
Hey, that is worth mentioning. If you enjoy the show, please support our sponsors. And usually when we're asking to support a sponsor, you've got to come out of pocket to do so. How much again is this service?
Gone free.
Okay.
That means you pay nothing.
Okay, there we go. Go to audible.com. If you love the show and you love us doing the show for you, please go ahead and support our sponsor, because let me tell you, we love Audible. They're taking great care of us, and they'll take great care of you too. Go to audible.com/Bruce. The price is free. You don't have to pay anything. It's absolutely free. Why wouldn't you do this? Please, we beg you, if you love the show, please go ahead and give Audible a try. Audible.com/Bruce. And again, one more time, how much does it cost?
El Frio!
I think you need to reread that Spanish for Dummies.
See?
All right, Bruce, let's have some fun. Let's talk about what is going to be, in my opinion, one of our very most fun shows we've ever done. Oh, yeah. Hashtag It's Miller Time. It's the Jim Cornette episode here on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. And I'm fired up about it, man.
Well, you know what? Before we talk about that, I'm going to go off format here, because I got some shit I got to plug. And I'm going to plug it off at the top. We're going to plug it at the end, too. But I got to talk about New York City first, Conrad.
Well, why wouldn't we talk about New York City? New York City's our number one market. You know, I've had a lot of industry professionals kind of take me to task about, oh, you're sharing too much information with your audience. Nope, I don't care. New York City, you are our number one market. Is that true or false, Bruce?
Without a doubt, man. Love you, New York.
And you guys have come out en masse, so much so that we're in high demand in New York. to the point that tickets are selling faster than any of our other shows. We are nearly sold out. If you were putting this off, do not wait any longer. Yes, I realize it's April. Yes, I realize the show isn't until August. If you want to come, go to livenation.com right now. Type in something to wrestle with Bruce Prichard and go ahead and snag your tickets. VIP, how many are left, Bruce?
I think we are pretty much damn sold out on VIP.
0.0 VIP are left. General admission's all you got, but if you want to come see us, please make us a part of your SummerSlam weekend, but please make it a priority. Cruise on over to Live Nation right now. You'll have an opportunity to do everything you want SummerSlam weekend. You can come see us, then go see NXT that night, and then the next day, of course, it's SummerSlam. We can be a big part of your SummerSlam weekend. We'd be proud to have you. Yes, we do have special guests. Yes, we do have special surprises. Yes, it is going to be something you want to be a part of, and you can be over at livenation.com. But before we get there, we're coming to St. Louis on Sunday afternoon, June 18th. It's Father's Day. We're going to be at the South Broadway Athletic Club. And where are tickets, Bruce?
At notarib.com, you can get tickets. And you know what, man? We're just same situation. Those VIPs, they go quick, man, but you can still come see us. It's going to be a great day. Father's Day.
We had an hour-long conversation about a stunt we are trying to pull off for St. Louis that is going to make the internet smile. If you are able to attend, you should. Before you ask, no, we are not going to record it and air it here. So it's not something that you're going to be able to experience unless you're there in the building on Sunday afternoon, June 18th. Now, why are we in St. Louis? It's Money in the Bank weekend. This can be the best Father's Day of all. Go ahead, come check us out, and then cruise up the street a couple of miles and check out WWE's Money in the Bank, which is always a fun time. Even if you're just a casual wrestling fan, there's going to be some crazy crash and burns at Money in the Bank. Maybe not the boys' favorite match, but as a wrestling fan, there's some cool stuff going on that day. But first, you can get warmed up with Bruce and I at notarib.com. VIP's already sold out. General admission is going to sell out. If you'd like to come see us, hurry to notarib.com right now. But then in July, man, you've got some really big stuff going over across the pond. And I'm talking to you, Birmingham, Manchester, and London. What's going down, Bruce?
Well, we aren't coming. I'm coming. I'm coming by myself. Conrad is going to
work. I do mortgages.
He's going to work.
I have a real life job.
Well, you know, we both do, but at the same time, Conrad's going to be here holding down the fort and making money. And I'm going across the pond by myself, but Conrad is arming up a brick.
Yeah, so let's run through that. What we're doing on this side is we're deciding kind of what the topics are going to be for these shows, and then I'm going to do all of my research, and I'm going to have all of my little jabs, and we're going to be ready. This Brit is going to say, Roll Tide. I mean, this is going to feel exactly as if I was there, except, you know, he'll probably drink Guinness instead or something like that.
Maybe something like that. But hey, I'm going to be over there on Sunday, July 16th in Birmingham, England at the Around the World Bar. And then Monday, July 17th, going to Manchester at the Comedy Store. And then Tuesday, July 18th at the Walkabout Sports Bar. And you can get tickets over at hookedonevents.co.uk or ringsideworld.co.uk or wegottickets.com. But come see me. If you're in the United Kingdom, this is your one chance. I'm going to be there, going to be having a blast. So it should be a great time, and we may add a few shows in there. You just never really know.
But first, these shows need to sell out, so check them out, wegottickets.com. You're going to be glad that you did. If this tour is successful, we will be back. We get lots of questions about, are you coming to Ireland? Are you coming to Scotland? Are you coming to Australia? If these go well, we will do more. If these don't go well, we won't do more. That's pretty simple. If you'd like to see us go ahead and continue to do these, go ahead and check us out. WeGotTickets.com. Do we plug enough shit? Can we actually talk about Jim Cornette now? Goddamn.
You're dead in a plate full of piss, motherfucker.
So let's talk about Jim Cornette. I mean, are we done plugging all of our gimmicks now?
You know, did we say BrucePrichard.com? We'll work that in later.
Gosh.
What?
Thank you. Let's not overdose on it. Goodness gracious. Jim Cornette.
James E.
James E.
You know, his middle name is not E, or doesn't start with an E, I don't believe.
Well, is your last name Love?
Maybe.
Is your first name Brother?
Could be.
What's your middle name?
I don't know.
Motherfucking.
All right.
So Jim Cornette, one of our MLW brethren here, fellow podcaster, manager extraordinaire, promoter, man, he's done everything in the business. And I don't know that we're going to be able to cover his whole career in a timely fashion here. So I think what we might do is get a little bit off the beaten path. And man, let's just have some fun today. Let's just tell some stories. Let's just enjoy a little Miller time. It's my understanding that Cornette broke in the Continental Territory. Would that have been when you met him? And roughly when would that have been? Early 80s sometime?
I met Corny, I believe in Memphis, Tennessee, or Nashville, Tennessee. I don't really remember. Well, it may have even been fucking Louisville, Kentucky, for all I know. But I remember visiting my brother Tom during one of his stints in Tennessee, probably in 82. I think was the time frame, and met Jim, but it was just kind of a, hey, how you doing? And that was about it. And Jim took pictures and was just starting out on his managerial career. But the next time that I saw Jim was 1983 in Houston, Texas, when he came to work for Mid-South Sports and the big cowboy Bill Watts. So it was, we became friends then at that time.
So Jim got in the business really, really early, like 20, 21, something like that.
Well, Jim had always been around the business. His mom always took him to the matches, and Jim took pictures at ringside, and he always hung around the back, and he was kind of like me in that way, in that he wrote the programs, he took the pictures for the programs, and he was that kid that was into everything, absolutely lived and breathed and loved the wrestling business.
And there's actually pictures out there of him as a photographer. So another photographer is taking pictures of matches, and you see a young Jim Cornette there,
focusing his camera.
Yeah, who probably barely has a driver's license, taking pictures. But I think he made his managerial debut or his ringside debut, as far as on camera, in September of 82, managing Sherry Martel. Does that sound right?
Well, I don't know. He may have. I remember the first guys that Jim managed was like Frank Morrell, and he had the Assassins, and who the hell else? It was part of him, and Jimmy Hart had a stable in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was the most god awful motley crew,
ragtag bunch.
Oh God, it was absolutely horrible. And I remember the first time seeing Jimmy was he wore like a sailor's cap, like a captain's of a yacht.
Yeah.
Cap, and he had the damn tennis racket, and he looked just like a spoiled, rotten mama's boy.
Which was his gimmick of the rich kid who
that wasn't a gimmick. That's a shoot.
So he was a rich kid turned inept manager?
Yes.
Okay.
Damn right.
So wow, art and imitating life.
I tell you, man, Jimmy really, folks, for those of you that don't know, and I can already hear my phone ringing. Goddamn motherfucker! You got this wrong. You got that wrong. I'll kill you for this. Jim's dad was like a big time hoity-toity newspaper publisher in Louisville, Kentucky. In the days when the guy that ran the newspaper was more powerful,
he controlled the information for the town.
You damn right.
Yeah,
he was the shit.
Right.
And his dad was a very, very powerful man and very politically connected. And Jim lost his dad at an early age and was raised by his mom, but his dad was well-to-do and big time. And Jimmy wasn't hurting for extra spoonful of porridge as he was growing up. Spoonful of porridge, Mom.
I think he's still probably doing okay up at Castle Cornette. So as we say, he starts with this gimmick of the spoiled rich kid, and one of the early things they do is, his clients start firing him very early on, like after their first match. And that's kind of the routine. And then eventually they move to Mid-South Wrestling. And that's when he starts to strike fire working with Bill Watts. What interaction did you have with him in Watts territory?
Well, when Jim came in, he obviously came in with the Midnight Express, and it was the first time that I got to be around Jim at length. And we just became friendly at that point in time. We were about the same age and shared the same love of the business. But it was somebody that Cornette could talk to about the business that was on, the business end of things. But Corny came in and, man, he set the territory on fire. He was different. He was unlike anything that anyone had ever seen before. You had your stereotypical managers that you grew up in the business with, like J.J. Dillon and Gary Hart, J.C. Dyke, Saul Weingroff, older guys, sometimes retired wrestlers who became managers to maintain their presence in the business. Now here's this young kid who's coming in that never wrestled, and what the hell's he doing here? But that could generate heat.
Yeah.
Better than any of the old timers. And he did it by just running his mouth.
Bill Watts, in his own words, once talked about the young Jim Cornette by saying, he was so obnoxious, I wanted to slap him. I knew he was instant box office if he could get me that riled up. So if you can get the cowboy fired up as much wrestling as he'd been around, you're probably on to something.
Oh, well, fuck, then I was box office because I could ride the fucking cowboy.
You had a pretty good run, kid. I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
There's rumor and innuendo out there that he being Cornette, pronouns pal, actually winds up in Mid-South because he visited a television taping in Memphis with Lawler and Jerry Jarrett. And Jarrett suggested they do a talent trade. So the Express Gang and Cornette wind up in Mid-South as a part of that talent trade. Is that the way you remember that going down?
Well, the trade was Bill Dundee. I don't know. It was a bit of a talent trade, but it was also Bill Dundee coming in to book Mid-South. And Dundee was taking a lot of the cast-off talent from the Tennessee territory. And Cornette happened to be right there, and it's like, okay, hey, can you do something with him? And Midnight Express was born.
And at the time, Memphis probably couldn't afford to live without Jimmy Hart, who was probably the top heel manager in that territory at the time, just based on seniority, right?
Yeah, Jimmy was entrenched in Memphis, so Jimmy wasn't going anywhere.
It's not like
that point in his career.
So let's talk about the racket, because that is really synonymous with Jim Cornette. And when the entire time I've been watching wrestling, that's been synonymous with him. And I'm curious if you know any, I'm sure we've got fun racket stories, but do you recall ever having a conversation with him about how that came about? Was it just viewed as highfalutin for Southern wrestling fans that someone played tennis and was the rich kid at the country club, and that's the reason he wore the yachting hat and the tennis racket?
The way I remember it was Cornette had seen a movie or something of a rich kid that had a badminton racket and always carried this badminton racket around. And the stereotype of, Biff and Muffy at the tennis court was synonymous with that rich, snobby kid. So to be different, nobody had a tennis racket. You had guys that had canes, and Jimmy Hart had his megaphone, and you had even people that had golf clubs and shit, and it was just something to be different. No one had a tennis racket.
Yeah.
Corny used a tennis racket.
Well, I'm sure it came in handy, with all the riots he would incite with those aggressive fans.
Goddamn, I put my lucky horseshoe in there, strap that motherfucker in.
Which is a shoot, by the way.
He would put a horseshoe in there?
Oh, goddamn right he would.
So if he did have to use it, it was going to fucking hurt.
Yes. He'd swing that sumbitch. He swung for the fences.
That's amazing.
I'll fuck somebody up. Come at me, motherfucker. Goddamn hillbilly.
This hillbilly calling another hillbilly a hillbilly. What the fuck? Can you imagine another southerner dissing a goddamn southerner?
You do that to me every week on this show.
Shut up, hillbilly.
Okay. The schedule of the Mid-South territory was brutal, and everybody knows that it was brutal, but how about this? At one point, Cornette worked 103 days straight before being ordered by the doctors to take a break and do some bed rest.
Pussy.
I knew you were going to say that. According to Cornette, he offers the following example, quote, 2 weeks of our lives, 14 days. We did 2 one-hour TV shows, 15 house shows, 2 all-day promo sets, drove 4,700 miles in a car while doing that. And I can't speak for anybody else, but I made, and I was only 22 years old and just pleased as punch to be there, $5,600 for 2 weeks in 1984. Not bad.
Yeah, that ain't bad, Jack.
So the miles and the money in the old wrestling cliche is all that matters. And obviously he was a top act very early in his life. And it's important for us to mention here that he's doing this in 84. He was born in 61. The dude's 23 years old, living his wrestling dream, making $5,600 for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's a pretty fun
good.
deal.
Pretty good.
Pretty fun deal. Let's talk about Mid-South before we jump out of Mid-South. I've heard that there is a fun story that you want to share with everybody about a match with Hacksaw Duggan and Hercules Hernandez.
Oh, Jesus Christ, man. You know, everybody talks about what a genius Bill Watts was and how great of a promoter he was and this mind and shit. He's the only son of a bitch I know that would book a hair match in 2 towns in the same week with the same guys involved, with the same finish. So they had worked up this program with Hercules Hernandez and Hacksaw Jim Duggan, where Herc had been the bodyguard of Jim Cornette. The match stipulation was that if Herc won, then Duggan would have to get his head shaved, and if Duggan won, Cornette would have to get his head shaved. Well, the big town on the loop was a Sunday show in Houston where they had this match where the loser of the match would get their head shaved. Either Cornette gets his head shaved or Duggan gets his head shaved. And, Duggan was red hot and Corny was the top heel. So, obviously, Corny was going to get his head shaved. And I'm sitting at the office on maybe Thursday, and Cornette calls me, and he's talking to me about blah, 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 we're doing this. And, God damn, and they shaved my head last night in New Orleans. I said, what? We did the hair match, shaved my head in New Orleans. How the fuck you do that? We got the hair match in Houston. They had the match, and again, this is how fucked up the finish was the match, Herc actually won and beat Duggan, so Duggan should have gotten his head shaved. Instead, they send all the baby faces down, and they jump Cornette, and they hold Cornette down, and they go to shave his head. But the clippers don't work, so they send out, and the boys come down with disposable Bic shaving.
Oh, my
shavers.
gosh.
And they actually, now Cornette had agreed to just the buzz cut. But since the clippers don't work, they don't have scissors, they don't have anything, they shave his head with Bic razors. Which is great for New Orleans and the fucking 200 people they drew there. They did drew a little more than 200 people, but it wasn't as big as Houston was going to be on Sunday.
Right.
So now we've got our heel manager that they're paying money, which we were sold out on that Sunday. They're paying money to see Cornette get his head shaved. But he's already gotten his head shaved in New Orleans. So they get some Yahoo Jim Jameson from Memphis, Tennessee, and bring him in as Cornette's cousin. And the stipulation is that if that Jim Duggan already shaved Cornette's head earlier this week, but by God, we're going to humiliate his whole family, family member by family member. And if Cornette loses, we're taking this mask. And Cornette comes out in a mask and doesn't want to take the mask off. But we're going to take the mask off of him and shave his cousin's head, and gave Jim $500 to shave his head. The Jim Jameson guy. But it was a debacle. And Watts sends us the tape from New Orleans. Cornette getting his head shaved, wants us to play it on Saturday night while we're promoting Sunday. Cornette possibly getting his head shaved. I just thought it was absolutely asinine. Motherfucker.
So not too long after being here and setting the territory on fire, they decide, hey, you know what? Let's try the big city living and maybe get off the road a little bit. This Mid-South travel is brutal. So they try their hand in Dallas, working world class. Obviously a bigger city, but also a pretty easy travel schedule comparatively. But then again, everything was easy compared to Mid-South. And where they were feuding with the Rock and Roll Express in Mid-South, here in world class, they're feuding with the Fantastics. So again, another really badass tag team. If you're not really familiar with the Fantastics, I would encourage you to go out of your way to watch some Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers matches that they had with the Midnight Express. Two of the more underrated performers, especially as a tag team. Wouldn't you agree, Bruce?
Yeah, they were great together. The only negative with the Fantastics was that usually they had to follow the Rock and Roll Express.
Yeah.
And were immediately compared to them.
Sure.
Had the roles been reversed,
history could have been different.
Yeah, Rock and Roll would have been compared to the Fantastics. And I thought both teams really held their own. But again, whoever's first, that's who steals the heart of the fan.
And then, of course, eventually, they start to look for other opportunities because, everybody does in world class, especially if you can't get going significant business with the Von Erichs, because the Von Erichs were consistently programmed on top. Do I have that right?
Yeah, they were, but also the fact that the Fantastics were a young babyface team, they were different than the Von Erichs. So they were able to kind of get their niche in there. And the Midnight Express, they were a different team, man. And they came in with Cornette, adding Cornette to that mix, made them different, made them unique, and made them a great attraction.
Well, life behind the scenes became a little different during Jim's time in world class because he made the decision to go ahead and get married. So chat me up. What can you tell us about Jim Cornette's first wedding? I feel like there's a good story in here somewhere.
Well, Cornette finished up in Dallas, and he went on to WCW in Charlotte. But his first wife was from Dallas, and he had met her in WCCW. So the wedding was going to take place in Dallas, and I flew in for the wedding. It was a nice little cozy affair, but the dubious honor of walking Mrs. Cornette, the real Mrs. Cornette, Jim's mom, I got to walk her down the aisle and place her in her seat before the wedding, and what a beautiful day that was. Evening.
So, okay, that's a cool story, bro. That's not really what I wanted to know about. If Jim Cornette got married,
yeah,
then the night before or sometime prior to that wedding, there was probably a bachelor party.
There was.
And if Jim Cornette has a bachelor party and Bruce Prichard's there, some shit went down.
Well, let me tell you, and right about now, Jim Cornette's asshole is puckered so tight in Louisville, Kentucky, as he's listening to this. You know what Jim Cornette's bachelor party consisted of?
What's that?
Bunch of guys. I met Mark Hildebrand there, who's the
phenomenal referee.
Great referee, great guy. Wonderful guy. One of Corny's best friends and became a friend of mine. Great guy. Got to meet Mark there. That was cool. Norman Dooley, I think that was his name. Norm Dooley. But it's a bachelor party.
Sure.
You know what we did? We all gathered.
Whoa. Let me guess.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about this.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess two things.
Yeah.
You watched videotape or Betamax or whatever it was of wrestling and pornography.
No porn.
It was all wrestling.
Yeah. It was like 5 or 6 guys in a hotel room.
You goddamn wait till you see this match.
And these motherfuckers sat around and watched wrestling. And nobody drank.
And you were in the corner smoking dope by yourself?
I finally excused myself, and yeah. I did. I did go back to my room to inhale.
Of course.
And find beer. And
so no drugs, no alcohol,
no drugs,
no women.
Alcohol, no way. Yeah, I was just watching wrestling.
Wait. Cornette didn't have some chicken chain somewhere?
Well, I'm not saying it has some chicken chain somewhere.
But
I'm
not
just
there.
saying-
Not there.
Yeah, no, it was watching wrestling tapes.
That's disappointing.
Yeah, well. Wait a minute. You're disappointed?
Yeah.
I flew in for it.
Man, I was really fired up about this bachelor party story.
Oh, man.
I thought there'd be a fucking donkey, midgets, balloons, candles.
There probably was.
Ping pong balls.
There probably was, but that was probably at the
Anal ring
bachelorette
toss.
problem. Maybe that might have been at the bachelorette party.
I thought he'd like put a chick in a kiddie pool and coat her in mayonnaise and then throw lunch meat at her and try to get it to stick.
Where do you come up with this shit, Conrad?
Nothing like,
I've never heard anything like that. I mean, are you talking Oscar Mayer?
no, dude, something real classy, something real nice. Boar's head.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
You know.
You know, my kids listen to this.
Well, they're getting an education about their dad. Just saying. So as you mentioned, he does make his way, he being Jim Cornette, pronouns pal, over to Jim Crockett Promotions in Charlotte. They have a very successful run, as everyone is familiar. Do a series of matches again with the Midnight Express, work with everybody.
The Midnight Express had a run with the Midnight Express?
Motherfucker, yes.
Okay, don't get hot.
You don't
They
know.
worked with the goddamn Rock and Roll Express.
And they worked with the Midnight Express.
Okay, never mind.
Paul Heyman had the new Midnight Express.
No, he had the real Midnight Express.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
All right. Anyway,
I know I had something to clarify.
Stan Lane comes into the group. Dennis Condrey goes home, etc., etc. Either way, the concept is Cornette is big box office everywhere he goes, has a pretty good run there, and then ultimately decides to leave not too long after Halloween Havoc 1990. But before then, he gets a taste of kind of the behind the scenes aspect of the business. He joined the booking committee and the creative team for WCW. Once Jim Crockett is bought out, Turner buys in 89 sometime, I believe. That's when he started to have a hand in starting to format some of the television, help write the storylines, things like that. And obviously he's a good guy to do that, since he's one of the only managers in the business at that time to incite fucking riots and need police escorts to and from the ring. That be fair to say?
Yeah, it is. But also when you talk about the creative end of the business and the detail that goes into booking and the detail that goes into writing television, Corny is anal about details, and Corny is anal about keeping notes, and he kept notes of every house and every payoff and every finish. He wrote down all the finishes every night of all their matches, and if there was a creative finish that Bill Dundee did with someone else, he would write that down, and he just kept meticulous notes. So to put Cornette on a creative team, pure genius, because he had not only his own warped mind full of creative ideas, he stole from the best, and he studied the best and wrote everything down and documented all that shit.
Yeah, and that is available in one of Jim Cornette's books that you may want to go out of your way to get. It is going to be a collector's item at this time because I believe they're sold out. I don't believe you can get it just anywhere, but he does have a Midnight Express book. It's essentially a scrapbook of all things Midnight Express.
Buy my book, motherfucker.
He goes through it in great detail. It's for their 25th anniversary. It's called the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette 25th Anniversary Scrapbook. He actually keeps copies of his check. He runs through what the houses were, what his payoff was. It is a fascinating look at the behind the scenes aspect of the business. It is something that is difficult to get, but he's got other books and t-shirts that are available now at jimcornette.com. You might also enjoy Rags, Paper, and Pens, the merchandising of Memphis Wrestling, Tuesday Night at the Gardens, Pro Wrestling in Louisville. Both of those books are by our great friends Jim Cornette and Mark James.
Did you make a side deal with Cornette or something?
No, I just figure since we're going to bust his balls so fucking hard here, we ought to let him make a couple bucks over at jimcornette.com. I thought that was a pretty good trade at jimcornette.com, that we get all this entertainment about talking about Jim Cornette. We could at least mention jimcornette.com.
And we're mentioning JimCornette.com. We haven't once mentioned BrucePrichard.com.
Well, we fucking shilled tickets for 38 minutes at the top of the show. Can I just fucking mention
because
somebody
I want
else?
my people to come see us live.
Okay, let's get back on track. He has a falling out with Ole Anderson. He being Jim Cornette.
Thank you,
pronouns,
pal. God damn it.
Has fallen out with Ole Anderson. Jim Herd is in control. Ultimately, they try to get him to come back. He says, fuck that, I'm sitting it out. And he does. And he sits out the end of his contract rather than come back. He's just not pleased with the way the Midnights have been booked or presented. So he just sits it out. He and Stan Lane leave. Bobby Eaton stays on. We all kind of know what happens from there. He decides, you know what? I believe in old school territorial wrestling enough. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to start my own territory. Smoky Mountain Wrestling was born in 1991. They promoted shows in Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Georgia, and the Carolinas. And that's probably one of his most enjoyable times in the business. Now, I'm sure it's very stressful to be involved in that, but he certainly had a good time doing it. Wouldn't you agree?
I think he did. I think that it was a passion project, and he had a lot of help from Rick Rubin.
I don't think a lot of people know that. Share that story.
Well, Rick Rubin, who is a legendary music producer, and at the time, the hot act that Rubin had discovered and was really pushing with Black Crowes. But Rubin invested some money and helped Corny out to get the damn thing started, and did a few cross-promotion things with Black Crowes and Smoky Mountain Wrestling. But he helped out there a little bit. But it was a passion project, and was something that Cornette had always dreamed of doing. And he actually did it, man. He started his own territory, ran his own damn territory the way he wanted, the way wrestling used to be, and the way we like it. God damn.
It's worth mentioning that when you say Rick Rubin, a lot of casual wrestling fans may not really know who that is, but he's a former co-president of Columbia Records, and along with Russell Simmons, founded Def Jam Records. So if you've ever heard of guys like, I don't know, Beastie Boys, LL Cool J, Public Enemy, Run DMC, he was a big part of their career. Maybe little bands like Metallica, Black Sabbath, AC/DC, guys like Mick Jagger, Jay-Z, people you might have heard of. Rick Rubin was a big wrestling fan and had a lot of confidence in Jim Cornette. So quite the nod.
And one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. And he, to me, what I love Rick Rubin for was going out in the resurgence of Johnny Cash. So for all the kids out there that think that all Johnny Cash did was his later work, Hurt and all that stuff, that was Rick Rubin, and that was Rick Rubin bringing Johnny Cash back to the forefront in the year 2000.
And lots of guys that you're familiar with worked in Smoky Mountain. The Dirty White Boy, who wrestled in the WWF as
T.L. Hopper.
Boo Bradley, who worked in the WWF as
Santa Claus.
Or,
well, that's where we got him from Smoky Mountain for Santa Claus. Balls Mahoney.
Tracy Smothers, Mark Curtis, New Jack and Mustafa, Al Snow, Jerry Lawler was there, Eddie Gilbert, Johnny Gunn, who worked for you guys as
Sal Sincere,
Eddie Gilbert, Devin Storm, Dan Severin, Chris Candido, Primetime Brian Lee. There was a famous woman who we've covered on the show before. She got her start there. Her name was
Midnight, Mooney, Lucky, Bunny.
You gonna help me?
Lip, what? Sonny,
Bob Holly, Chris Jericho, Lance Storm, D'Lo Brown.
Hey, I'm gonna give you a good one. This was corny when Jericho and Lance Storm came in, and I asked him about the Thrill Seekers, and he says, I don't know, goddamn Lance Storm might have it, but that fucking Jericho, I don't know if he'll ever make it.
Is that real?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
He loved them both and thought they both had it, but he just would get frustrated with Chris sometimes.
If you're not familiar with what we're talking about, they were a tag team, they being Storm and Jericho, called the Thrill Seekers. And Jim put together a phenomenal video. If you haven't seen this, go out of your way to check out the Thrill Seekers music video from Smoky Mountain. It is absolutely outstanding. And you might also enjoy their very bloody match that they had. I believe it was against the Heavenly Bodies. And this is something you might want to go check out. I believe it was from August of 94. Night of the Legends, I believe, is the date on the show, or the title of the show. And, wow, something to go out of your way to see. August 5th, 1994. Something else that's been notable from tape collectors about Jim Cornette is the Dairy Queen incident. We can't go through this entire show without talking about this. When I first got into tape collecting in 1997.
Is that a real thing?
What?
Collecting tape?
Yeah.
Like Scotch tape, duct tape? What's your favorite tape?
The type that goes over your fucking mouth.
That's just rude. I'm going, you know what? I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm going to Orlando.
I'm
done with you.
I'm going to be quiet. I had a really good joke there, but I'm going to keep that to myself. Catch me up.
I'm going to make an impact.
The Dairy Queen tape.
Yeah.
We fans heard about it, and it became this thing that everybody wanted to go out of their way to see. And RF Video made a fucking mint back in the day, just based on this one scene. Tell us about this tape, and then maybe try to recreate it a little bit in your very best upset and angry Jim Cornette.
You know, I heard the story first about Jimmy going off at the Dairy Queen. And then I heard that there was actually a tape that existed. And I'm trying to remember the guy's name that recorded it. But Chris Candido and Tammy were in the car. God damn, what's the guy's name in California? But he recorded it. And then they recorded, they went to the Dairy Queen. Cornette ordered.
Jericho's in the car, I think.
I don't know if Jericho was in the car or not. He may have been. I don't really remember. But I remember hearing the story of Cornette ordering a Jim Cornette order. Now, if you've ever actually heard Jim Cornette order something, especially in the day when he didn't eat the healthiest of meals, it sounded ridiculous.
I want goddamn triple with triple cheese, extra cheese, double mayo, double onion, motherfucker.
And I kid you not, there were times when he would order, he would throw in a motherfucker from here, now and then. So they make this order. There's 5 or 6 people in this van or this car, and they make this ridiculous order, and they get up to the window, and they're waiting, and they're waiting, and they're waiting.
Now, this is worth mentioning. This is after a show. It's late
at night, and they got hundreds of miles to drive to get home.
In a van full of wrestlers who are hungry. So they place a ridiculous order.
And the only thing open
is Dairy
Queen. So it's, they want to get their food and want to get the fuck on the road. So they're waiting at the window, and the girl comes over to the window, and she's like, yeah. She says, where's our goddamn order? And she says something along the lines of, oh, I thought you guys were kidding. Which Cornette, who I guess was in the passenger seat, gets out and starts cutting a promo on this poor little girl and the Dairy Queen thing, gets out of the car, walks around the front of the car to go to the window, and just cut a ungodly promo on this woman. Think I'm kidding, motherfucker? I got 300 fucking miles to drive. God damn it, I want my fucking triple cheese, triple fucking hamburger, goddamn extra onion, double mayonnaise. What the fuck you think we're ordering this shit? It just goes absolutely berserk. And whoever's in the car, they tape this entire thing. Well, I heard about the promo first. And then someone says, oh yeah, it's on tape. I was, oh my God, you got to give me that tape. And already at that time, long before RF Video and those guys got a hold of it, man, I had that tape sent to me. That they were already making copies and sending out this copy of all you've got to see Cornette's rant. So it was just legendary, and you got to check it out. The Jim Cornette Dairy Queen rant is priceless. And folks, this is real life. This shit happened on a daily basis.
It's on YouTube right now. You can just go ahead and throw it in your Google machine. Jim Cornette Dairy Queen incident. Jimmy Del Rey, Jim Cornette, Jericho, Lance Storm, J.R. Benson, and Ron Head.
Ron Head is the one who shot it. Yeah,
they're all in the car together.
Jericho. I mean, what's his name's not in there? I thought Tammy and Chris were in there too.
No, I didn't think they were. No.
Okay.
Now I think that what you're remembering on the story is Tammy and Chris were actually inside the restaurant.
Okay.
So while these guys are going through the drive-through, Tammy and Chris decided to just go in to get their food.
Got it.
So they're all there.
So everybody witnesses. Yeah, it was legendary.
I mean, when Cornette opens the window and leans through and says, "We wouldn't have ordered the shit if we didn't want it, you stupid fucking ugly bitch."
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that.
I was like, this dude is my new fucking wrestling hero.
Yeah. Well, okay.
I mean, I don't know that I can behave like that in real life, but goddamn, more power to somebody who can. That's fucking awesome.
Oh, it was absolutely tremendous. You got to check it out, but it was a classic corny rant.
So, chat us up here. You guys start to do a little bit of a talent exchange with Smoky Mountain. You are in the WWF at the time. How does that come about? Who reaches out to who? It feels a little bit unusual for Vince McMahon to do things like this at the time, but I guess because business is down, he's open to other ideas. Or how does the thinking change there, and how does this relationship start?
Well, Jim Ross was doing some commentary, helping Corny out, and it was in between JR's stints too. So, I was always a big fan of Cornette. We were friends, and I was always looking for ways to bring Cornette in. This goes even way back to in the 80s, trying to get Corny in. He just wasn't interested in coming to New York, and wasn't his cup of tea, if you will. But Corny was looking for some help, and JR had ideas, and hey, maybe this could be a place where we could cultivate some young talent, and Corny could coach some of these guys up. So it was some place that we felt we could help control. We could send them talent for some of their bigger shows, help them draw a house, and maybe we'll be able to cultivate some guys and bring them up.
Given Jericho, Storm, Kane, all the names we ran through earlier,
Al Snow.
Even though a lot of those guys didn't come straight in, several did. That's a pretty cool concept that proved to be worthwhile. And we would see him do this later with Ohio Valley Wrestling, and I'm sure we're going to get there later, but it's one of, if you don't know what Jim Cornette did in Ohio Valley, he's one of the fucking unsung heroes of wrestling. We'll get there.
Sure. Well, but it came down to, I really want a Cornette.
You did.
I did. And Vince loved Cornette. He really wanted Cornette. But I also knew that to get Corny to cooperate with us,
he had to help him on his promotion.
You got to give him something.
Yeah.
So the pitch.
And when you're saying something, you don't mean money. You mean he has a passion project.
Corny wasn't interested. I mean, Corny's always interested in money. That wouldn't be true. But it was more of,
he wanted his deal to succeed.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so it was, all right, if we can promote Corny's Smoky Mountain and maybe use some of his talent on our show to be able to give Smoky Mountain a rub that way, maybe we can get Cornette up here. So at the time, Cornette was managing the Heavenly Bodies. Vince, it was always a weird, sticky situation in anything that had to do with my brother and suggesting him for a job or anything like that. So I let other people do that. And I let Pat Patterson kind of pitch, you got to see the Heavenly Bodies. They're great. They work and they do it. So I pitched to Cornette, hey, man, would you be interested in coming up and doing some Raws and maybe bring the bodies? And we plugged Smoky Mountain in the process. Well, shit. That was intriguing as hell. So I can get my tag team champions on your show and I can plug my shit on a national basis. And you may send some of your talent down to Smoky Mountain. And by the way, we'll help pay that talent that we send down there for you. So you don't have to really worry about that. That was an interesting prospect for him. So we book the Heavenly Bodies and Jim Cornette to come to TV. What Corny didn't expect was once he got there, Vince had other ideas. And Vince saw Jim Cornette as the American spokesperson
For
Yokozuna.
So, but let's take a pause here for a minute. The debut happens in July 25th, in fact, 1993. And they're at the Castle Rec Center in Alexandria Bay, New York. There's roughly 1,000 folks there. It would air on August 2nd. It got a 2.9 rating. And the way he's introduced is Vince McMahon is the babyface commentator at the time. Bobby Heenan is his sidekick on commentary. And they're doing a bit where Ted DiBiase is on the phone discussing his loss over the weekend on Wrestling Challenge to the 1-2-3 Kid, when all of a sudden, Jim Cornette is in the middle of a WWF ring. Smart marks at the time know that, he's running Smoky Mountain Wrestling, but even casual fans recognize him because, hey, this is the guy from Mid-South and from Dallas and from Memphis and most recently WCW and Jim Crockett Promotions. So it's kind of a cool deal. Now, the way Corny remembers this all coming together is he taped some sort of promo with your brother shit talking to you and taking a few jabs. Does this ring a bell?
Yeah, he did something like that at some point. Yeah.
So he mentions that, you guys were friendly. Yeah. You and
that was a promo that he did in Smoky Mountain or something, but I don't think it aired anywhere. It was just something he did.
He writes, Tom's father happened to be visiting from Texas
yeah.
and came to see the Smoky Mountain TV taping that Jimmy debuted at. And we decided to play a little joke on Tom's brother, Bruce. Bruce, as many people know, had been working for the WWF in booking and TV production for several years and had a memorable stint as manager Brother Love on TV in the early 90s. He talks about how he had known you from working in Houston in 84 and that you guys spoke every so often on TV. He continues, so at our TV, the Bodies and I did a promo with Tom's father talking about how the Prichard family, with Tom and Jimmy, was becoming a wrestling dynasty. I asked Tom's father if there were any other members of the family involved in the sport, and he replied that there was one other Prichard working for that fake wrestling company in New York, and a few other friendly jabs were thrown at Bruce. Of course, none of this was ever intended to air on TV, but I called Bruce and told him that his dad had done a great promo introducing Tom's new cousin, and that it was going to air on Smoky TV, and I had made a VHS tape of it so he could see it, without, of course, telling him the specific verbiage. Bruce said he was excited and couldn't wait to see it. So about a week later, I got a call from Bruce, whose first words were, "Very funny, motherfucker." He also alluded to the fact that he had not been alone when he watched it. Although he didn't mention who else had been in the room, it was believed that it was Vince McMahon, Pat Patterson, or both. I was laughing, but actually swallowed a giggle in midstream when the next words out of his mouth were, "So do you guys want to make some shots up here?" I asked if he was serious, and he said yes. They were looking for new talent, and he could see the Bonnies working with some of their teams, especially the Steiners, who had some bouts in WCW with the Midnight Express. So that's kind of how he says it all came around. And of course, eventually he makes the debut. How do you remember the tape thing going down?
I remember getting the tape. I remember watching the tape, and it was hilarious, but we pretty much had an idea.
When you watched the tape, did you watch it with Vince and Pat in your office?
I may have shown it to them at some point, yeah.
And they all...
I probably did, yeah. Of course they loved it.
And they knew it was a rib that he didn't actually air it.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt, yeah.
Okay. So before we talk about the debut angle, where Cornette comes out on Raw for the very first time, let's talk about what if he wouldn't have. Because a lot of guys in wrestling, when they get an offer from one company, they try to play it against the other company, don't they?
Yeah, without a doubt, all the time, man.
So by this time in 1993, Dusty's back with WCW. Now I know Cornette didn't leave there on the best terms in 90. And considering how it all turned out, he probably made the smarter choice in going to the WWF. And a smarter choice for our listeners would be to switch to dollarshaveclub.com.
Oh, man, no doubt about it. You know, I love my Dollar Shave Club executive razors. Matter of fact, I've got it packed in my bag for when I leave here tomorrow. Take it with me everywhere I go.
All right. Hypothetically, if Dusty Rhodes was trying to talk Jim Cornette into coming over to WCW at the time, what would it sound like if Dusty Rhodes were trying to convince Jim Cornette to switch to dollarshaveclub.com today?
Jim there. Jim there's the dream, baby. Listen, Jim there. Listen, baby. DollarShaveClub.com is a smarter choice. Now, you're going to get a great shave at a great price, and the dream knows how frugal you are, baby. But best of all, I know you don't like to leave Castle Cornette. You got that house on the hill just like you like it. And now, with DollarShaveClub.com, you ain't got to get your fat ass off the couch no more. You go down to the store where they got all them razors, they all locked up behind the case. You got to find somebody to open up the razor fortress.
Now, you know a good blade job when you see one, don't you, Dream?
Ooh, fucking like a monkey, baby. You know I do, Conrad. I like to keep my shaving simple, too. Now, you don't need no shaving gimmicks, no, baby. Don't put no polka dots on my razor. Give them to me with a weighty handle. About 4 on a cassette and some of that Dr. Carver shave butter. Ooh, it's so sweet. See, that's your first month supply. You get your entire first month supply for only $5. You hear me? $5 in free shipping, baby. You can't beat that.
So, Dream, what do you like best about dollarshaveclub.com?
Listen here, it's my secret. Okay, don't tell nobody. It's Dr. Carver's shave butter. Now, Jim, they like them smooth and hairless. He don't want no ingrown hair, the razor bumps. And Jimmy, if you would say, this stuff right here is slicker than come on a go-to.
For a limited time, new members get their first month of the Executive Razor with a tube of their Dr. Carver shave butter for only $5 with free shipping. After that, razors are just a few bucks a month, and you heard the dream. You'll get an awesome weighty handle, a full cassette of 4 razors, and a tube of their shave butter. After your first month, replacement cartridges ship automatically at their regular price.
And there ain't no hidden fees or commitments, and you can cancel it anytime you like. Just join our club today at dollarshaveclub.com/wrestle. That's dollarshaveclub.com, baby, /wrestle.
Check it out, dollarshaveclub.com/wrestle. You'll be glad you did. So Bobby Heenan is ecstatic to see Jim Cornette. He jumps in the ring and proclaims that he is the greatest manager in the history of wrestling, which is a really, really big rub at the time. And everybody kind of agrees that Cornette and Bobby Heenan are two of, if not the greatest managers of all time. Would you agree with that?
Wholeheartedly, and I think they would both claim the other is.
Meltzer wrote of the Angle, after watching the Angle on Monday Night Raw, which was good, this is a good opportunity for himself. The timing couldn't be better since there are no top flight managers working the national scene. So Cornette will stand out now more than ever when people like Heenan, Hart, Dillon, and Dangerously were around. And it's curious now because when you look at it, you don't really see the great stables of heel managers that we had back in the past. But here, Cornette certainly stands out.
I think Cornette would have stood out with the best of the best. I think if you put Cornette in the stable with like Blassie, Albano, the Grand Wizard, Gary Hart, Bobby Heenan, all those guys, Corny still would have stood out.
I wasn't diminishing Corny's talent.
No, I know what you're saying. I agree with you.
It's just an anomaly that,
yes.
Hey, Vince wasn't doing it at this time, and he's not doing it now. Were you influential in having him have a change of heart, or why does he say, okay, we'll do it? Is it because he feels like Yoko can't communicate the way he needs him to, and he doesn't have confidence in Fuji?
Well, Fuji couldn't cut a promo to save his life, and Fuji wasn't a promo guy, and Yoko wasn't a promo guy. So he needed that heat-seeking talker on that side, because you had Yoko who could deliver in the ring and could get heat in the ring, but you needed somebody to talk him into the arena.
So, of course, they debut the Heavenly Bodies here, and they issue a challenge to Rick and Scott Steiner on behalf of his team, the Heavenly Bodies. Meltzer would write, there was a lot of talk, some of it not positive, among some in the group about the surprise during the past week. None of the wrestlers were informed about it beforehand, which probably should have been handled better, since it created a week's worth of what may have been unnecessary worrying and speculation that got out of hand and had guys trying to fend off rumors that went way past ridiculous. Meltzer also writes, and this sounds probably very true about Cornette, quote, one thing people have to realize is that between running the business, booking the television and house shows, and honing his own stuff, Cornette eats, sleeps, and breathes Smoky Mountain 24 hours per day. Any time spent on outside activities is going to cut into what is already a tight schedule. In August, Cornette only has 3 WWF dates, a television taping on the 18th, one trip to Connecticut to cut face-to-face promos, and SummerSlam on August 30th. He goes on to say, and I thought you might appreciate this, Bruce, it's a nice ego boost that he got Vince McMahon to plug his product on WWF telecasts, but that doesn't mean a hill of beans when it comes to help improving Smoky Mountain's business. Bringing in WWF talent to Smoky Mountain under the right circumstances can help business, but it has to be done carefully and in a manner where this WWF talent isn't portrayed as being superior major league talent, because that will all but make the SMW wrestlers seem minor league in their own territory, which will kill them, but certainly Cornette is smart enough to avoid that obvious pitfall. So there's Meltzer's take. Kind of catch everybody up on what chaos would have been created by not smartening up the boys and him appearing on TV.
Yeah, this coming from the wrestling genius who has booked so many territories and been so successful with all of his own money promoting wrestling territories, and the mad genius that he is with all of his creative ideas that he's come up with on a blank piece of paper. So with all that being said, there probably was paranoia, but at the same time, you lose the surprise and you lose the shock value.
The paranoia comes from who?
The paranoia came on the SMW side.
There you
guys that were afraid that, oh my God, here's our fearless leader that is now on WWF television. Is he leaving us? Are we folding up our tent and going home? But it was done to create that shock, and maybe they should have been, had some kind of a heads up, and it should have been addressed. I don't know how quickly or how Corny did address it, but yeah, there was some paranoia on their side, and there were people wondering what if. And then, of course, which was completely the opposite, it was, oh, well, Bruce, of course, Bruce is going to take care of his brother, so the Heavenly Bodies are fine. Cornette will be fine, but what about us? So there was quite a bit of paranoia on their side, and maybe they could have handled that a little bit better.
Well, a few weeks later, we start to see the results. Quote, just 6 days after drawing its second biggest gate in its history, SMW shattered both its attendance and gate records for the K-Town Showdown on August 20th in Knoxville, headlined by Bob Armstrong and Jim Cornette in a lumberjack match in which Armstrong vowed to refund all the fans' ticket money should he fail to send Cornette to the hospital. A crowd of 2,780 fans paid $18,100, more than double the previous gay in the company's history in Knoxville. So
we killed the territory.
Well, it certainly meant more than a hill of beans.
Huh.
I'm just saying.
Nostra fucking Meltzer. There he goes again.
Cornette says, I discovered the ulterior motive behind Bruce's call about an hour after the Bodies and I arrived at the arena for our first taping. Bruce told me that Vince and Pat would like to talk to me and led me to catering. I assumed that Vince would want to air out all the negative things I had said over the years about his product, but shortly into the conversation, I realized he had no idea I had ever knocked them. I'd later learned that he never, to this day, watched or has watched any wrestling other than his own, so I didn't elaborate. Vince and Pat presented me with an offhand idea they had just had. That's all in quotes. that I could be WWF champion Yokozuna's American spokesman. So how did you guys convince a guy who is, by his own admission, not a fan of flying to take a WWF schedule? And obviously you try to be limited in your pitch at first. We just went over the fact that he only had 3 dates booked in August, but it seems like, and let's take a time out. A lot of people, I'm just assuming everybody knows this, a lot of people may not realize it, but Jim Cornette would rather drive to the other end of the world than fly anywhere. Do I have that right?
Yeah, Corny's not going to get on it.
Goddamn death tube, motherfucker.
And some of the distances that he would rather opt out of flying in order to drive, I mean, that would be pretty damn ridiculous at times, would it not?
No, you idiot. Driving meant I had double audible.
What is double audible?
Audible's the best way to enjoy books, you redneck. I can drive for hours and hours and listen to my favorite Audible titles like Sex for a Cheeseburger.
Wait a minute. That's not a title with Audible, Sex for a Cheeseburger.
Yes, it is, you hillbilly. Go check Audible right now and look for Sex on a Cheeseburger.
All right.
Look it up.
Well, I stand corrected. It is there. Sex for a Cheeseburger is available on Audible. How do you like it?
Double cheese, double onions, extra mayo.
I meant Audible. How do you like Audible?
I already told you, I love it. I listen when I'm in the car. I listen when I'm walking my dog Harley. I love Harley. When I eat a cheeseburger or fantasy booking Smoky Mountain for the 19th time. I'll tell you one thing, Conrad. I'd rather listen to Audible than listen to this damn show. That's for sure.
Well, if you're not happy at any point with your selection over at Audible, you can exchange it for any other title at any time. No questions asked. They even call it the Great Listen Guarantee.
I guarantee you I'm never coming on this show ever again.
Seriously, Corny, what's your favorite Audible book?
Bride of the Rat God by Barbara Hambly.
Well, to each his own. Do what Jim Cornette would do when you're on that same old commute. Let the traffic crawl while your pulse races. You can't make more time, but you can make the most of it. Turn your commute into something more with a free trial at Audible. Go to audible.com/Bruce to start now. That's audible.com/Bruce. So you guys talk him into managing Yokozuna. I guess since he's already there and he's excited and he's got the heavenly bodies excited, you guys kind of have the leverage at that point and he feels obligated to say yes, doesn't he?
No, he could have said no.
Sure, he could have.
Well,
but
he could have. He's a goddamn man. Well, you know.
Well, of course, we know that he starts managing Yokozuna, and this happens on August 9th. It includes footage of the Lex Express at Comiskey Park, and this was featured for the official contract signing for Luger Yoko at SummerSlam. And this is where we see Cornette come out with Mr. Fuji and, of course, the champion. And he is here as advertised, Yokozuna's new American spokesperson. After Luger signed the contract, Cornette announced that a clause was added to the match that said there would be no rematch. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the Steiner brothers start working with the Heavenly Bodies. The Steiners would win those matches by disqualification when Cornette would interfere. Let's talk about SummerSlam 93. That's where we see the Steiner brothers defeat the Heavenly Bodies after about 9.5 minutes when both champions, Rick and Scott, pin Jimmy Del Rey following the Frankensteiner. But what stands out most to me is the interview with the Steiner brothers' mom. Do you remember what happened during this interview ringside?
Absolutely not.
So the Steiners' mom and sister are ringside during the segment, and I guess their sister refers to Rick as Rob.
What's his name?
Well, when you talk to Linda, did she say, I hope Terry wins tonight?
Probably.
I'm just saying, it's fucking awesome. Well,
that's what you get when you go live and you talk to family.
No, I get it. I get it. It's just interesting to me that there's so much fucking scripting and control now. And back then it was so loose that fucking shoot names are making air.
Yeah, shit happens.
So in the main event, as we all know, Lex Luger defeats the world champion Yokozuna, but he does it by count out after about 18 minutes or so. And this doesn't exactly go the way we wanted. Now you can hear all about this in the Lex Express episode if you want what maybe should have happened, could have happened, might have happened, all about the Lex Express. It's available in the archives now. But before we get too much further into this, I feel like we're missing a golden opportunity here. Since Cornette was summoned in his very first meeting to meet with Vince, and Cornette has admitted that he was a little nervous about having to air out all the dirty laundry about the things he had been critical about, what might that have sounded like if Vince was in the loop on the things that Cornette had been saying before?
Oh my God. Shit.
You said what, pal?
Yeah, that just, it's silly even thinking about that.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, no, Vince has heard shit from everybody, so it wouldn't have, I don't think that it would have been,
Goddamn, pal, I appreciate your gusto and your passion. Maybe it was a little robust there, but all right, here's what we're thinking.
he would just turn it around, man.
What's the pitch sound like when he knows that, because he knows that Cornette doesn't want to come in full time?
Oh, he knew, man. It was.
Goddamn, pal, we know you've got a company to run. We know you're concentrated on that Smoky River wrestling you got down there
Smoky River.
In where they, Virginia. Yeah, right there where the Smoking River goes through there. But we only need a little bit of your time. Come to TV, cut some promos, make some television, pay-per-view appearances. We'll plug the smoke. What is it again? Yes, we'll plug your promotion.
He knew. He knew what buttons to push. He knew Corny hated to fly. He knew. We just went with that. He also knew Corny needed to promote his promotion. He knew what would get him to sign.
So let's talk about Survivor Series 1993. I've always been a little fascinated by this because we see Tom Prichard and Jimmy Del Rey with Jim Cornette defeating the Smoky Mountain Tag Team Champions, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, to win the titles after about 13 minutes. This happens when Prichard pins Gibson after Del Rey came off the top rope with Cornette's tennis racket. This all happens, of course, behind the referee's back. But on commentary, Ross notes that the feud between Cornette and the Rock and Roll Express had been going 10 years, dating back to when Cornette managed the Midnight Express. Everything about this is fascinating to me because this happens at a time when you guys aren't acknowledging number 2 at all. And I realized that at the time, it's not like WCW was presenting the Midnight Express or the Rock and Roll Express, but this just doesn't seem like something Vince does at the time, to have another promotion's titles on here and to have what happened in another company 5 years prior discussed.
Well, it was something that we were plugging in the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express issue. And it was something that was going on in Smoky Mountain at the time. So to acknowledge the history, and we didn't say WCW and went back to the original feud, which is really Mid-South, but that's what Jim was alluding to. But from time to time, Vince would acknowledge history, if you will, and go back and throw those kind of tidbits in there, especially with JR.
Oh yeah. Hashtag it's Miller time. Let's talk about 1994. They start the year off, of course, with Cornette still being the American spokesman for Yokozuna. They're still involved in the feud with Lex Luger. But let's fast forward to WrestleMania 10. It's Madison Square Garden. It's March 20th, 1994. Sellout, 18,000 fans on hand. And Cornette makes his WrestleMania debut, and he's here in Yokozuna's corner. I know that Cornette had been involved in a lot of big cards, whether it was Starcades or shows at the Superdome. But WrestleMania, even for someone who says he hated the product, had to be a pretty fucking cool little deal for anybody in the business. Do you remember having a conversation with Corny about his involvement in WrestleMania and that being his first one at WrestleMania 10?
Not in particular, but I think it's a big deal for anybody. And I'm sure that Corny felt that it was a big deal, milestone in his career to finally get there.
And then eventually 1995, let's just go ahead and skip around, because through the rest of 94, you see Cornette working with Yokozuna. He's also making appearances with the Heavenly Bodies, but mostly focusing on Smoky Mountain Wrestling. He's doing that full time. But as we cruise on in to 1995 in the WWF, now we see Owen and Yokozuna teaming together with Jim Cornette in their corner. And at WrestleMania 11, they would actually win the tag titles from the Smoking Guns. Do you remember any fun ribs that Owen Hart would have had at the expense of Yokozuna or Jim Cornette? Because this feels like there was lots of comedy in this trio.
I really don't remember anything specific, but I'm sure that, especially because Corny was easy to rib. Corny was someone that, especially like when Jake was there and taking the snake and shoving it up Corny's behind, and you never saw Corny move or be as agile as he was when those type of things took place. So I'm sure Owen had a lot of fun at Cornette's expense.
In 1995, Bill Watts comes to the WWF, and I found this always to be a really interesting development, especially when you consider the philosophies of Watts and Vince McMahon. Meltzer wrote in the Observer, Vince announced at a meeting of all WWF wrestlers prior to the In Your House pay-per-view show on September 24th in Saginaw, Michigan, that Bill Watts would be taking a larger share of responsibility for the creative end of wrestling. Both McMahon and Watts spoke at the meeting, with McMahon describing the new situation as he would be spending more time in his role as a corporate executive, and that Watts would take over many of his duties when it came to the creative aspects of the television, arena, and pay-per-view shows. McMahon said that he would still work for Watts on these aspects, but that he wouldn't overrule Watts. In addition to being in charge of finishes on television, arena, and pay-per-view shows, Watts will attend more arena events and has already started to evaluate wrestlers' performances and talking to them about it after matches. Although Watts gained a horrible reputation after his tenure in WCW a few years ago, up to this point, there has been no discontent among WWF wrestlers, at least to any major degree, about Watts since he's arrived. I found that interesting because Cornette was a Watts guy, because he respected Watts' philosophy of believable and credible wrestling. He really wanted to focus on the toughness and athleticism and just the idea that wrestling should be presented as a serious presentation. And it had a major impact, probably, on how Cornette thought about the business for the rest of his career and even now. But when he comes in here, is this something that Jim is looking forward to? Or is he so focused on Smoky Mountain he kind of doesn't give a shit?
I think that Jim was so focused on Smoky Mountain at that time still that he was probably happy that Watts was there because it was an ally for him and someone that he could personally relate to. But at the same time, I don't think that he was looking at it as hooray for me, because he wasn't looking at WWF as a priority for Jim Cornette.
Yeah. We'll talk about Bill Watts and the WWF in more detail, I'm sure, in the future. Smoky Mountain would close up shop in 1995. He would write, he being Jim Cornette, TV markets weren't going to make it in the wrestling recession of the mid-90s. Even the WWF lost $6 million in 1995. I hated to, but I had to close it up in December. So Cornette would close the doors in late November 95, early December, and sell off all of the Smoky Mountain rights and videos to the WWF. And later he would say that he probably chose the wrong time to start a wrestling fed because the business as a whole was in a recession. And there's been a lot of talk through the history of wrestling that the business is cyclical, and it was obviously in a down when he opened it. Meltzer wrote, the announcement was made to the wrestlers during the intermission at the house show on November 26th in Cookeville, Tennessee by President Jim Cornette. Cornette told the wrestlers that barring a miracle, it would be the group's final show. At the end of the show, in a symbolic gesture after the main event, all the faces and heels joined in, including the Heavenly Bodies, in attacking Cornette and leaving him for dead in the middle of the ring as he was carried back to the dressing room. On the December 18th, 95 edition of the Observer, Meltzer wrote, Jim Cornette had a meeting with Vince McMahon where he was offered a spot helping book, but no word on if he's accepted. So do I have it right here that Cornette wouldn't have moved from Tennessee to Connecticut to take this booking job until Smoky Mountain was completely closed up? So probably late 95, early 96 when he moves?
Yeah, there was absolutely, that wasn't an option for Corny until he just reached the end and knew that Smoky Mountain would not be able to continue. So made the deal to come in.
So he makes the deal to come in. And when he comes in to do creative. I'd love to hear what it sounded like the first time Vince McMahon and Jim Cornette are in a creative meeting together.
Wow. That day, and I forget who all was there. It was me, Vince, and maybe Cornette. I don't know if JR was sitting in with us that day or who. I want to say there was somebody else there, but it was, the first time you're feeling someone out, and the first time you get in a meeting, and it's a happy, joy meeting, but Corny was into telling stories, and Vince was kind of feeling Cornette out, and it just got to be a storytelling day. And I remember Corny riding with me, and when it was time to go, Vince pulling me in the kitchen and going,
"Goddamn, pal, can't have another day like that."
And I just had to kind of rein Corny in and say, "Hey man, we got to get down to business." But it was just a strange day, the first day, and Vince started second guessing himself. But it was simply a feeling out day, and it was just simply guys getting comfortable with everybody. But Cornette had a completely different philosophy on things, and the idea was for Vince McMahon to take that time and spend more time in the office, and for Cornette and I to kind of take over the television writing, let Jim Ross take over the day-to-day booking of the house shows, and Vince McMahon to kind of just sit back and supervise from afar. So the idea was originally to get me and Corny off to ourselves, kind of like Pat Patterson and I were for a while.
So Cornette, as we mentioned, obviously finds himself moving to Connecticut. I have got to hear some fun stories, and if you don't have anything, then just let me know what it might sound like for Cornette to recap what it was like to live in Connecticut, or the first time he went looking for houses in Connecticut. Give me fucking something.
Fucking Yankee motherfuckers.
Corny hated the Northeast, hated Connecticut. And at first he was living downtown Stamford at these high-rise apartments. So you take a country boy from Louisville, Kentucky, and stick him in a high-rise in the middle of Stamford, Connecticut, and he was positively miserable. So he hated the people. He couldn't understand them. They couldn't understand him.
What the fuck can't you understand, you goddamn Yankee motherfucker? I'll kill you.
It was just a constant battle of us versus them with Jimmy, and he tried hard to fit in, but it was the losing battle on so many fronts. The hatred of, now imagine you're living in the Northeast, and for those of you who have never been in the Northeast, I would say that the Northeast has some of the greatest Italian food outside of Italy, any other place in the world. And Jim had his mom send him Chef Boyardee spaghetti dinners by the case. And when I say by the case, man, I'm talking like the big 24 case of Chef Boyardee spaghetti dinner. Goddamn, it's a full spaghetti dinner. You take the goddamn tomato sauce, you get a pound of goddamn hamburger, you mix the hamburger up with it, you put the tomato sauce in there, you boil the fucking spaghetti. It's a perfect goddamn meal. But all around him are some of the greatest Italian restaurants anywhere in the world.
Sure.
But he thought they sucked, and that Chef Boyardee boxed spaghetti from Kentucky was better because he couldn't find that in Connecticut because they actually had fresh pasta and real homemade sauce, and he wanted his Chef Boyardee boxed spaghetti.
I hear you, but let me just go ahead and give a shout out for Chef Boyardee's ravioli and pizza when I was a kid. That stuff was the real MVP.
Oh, you goddamn hillbilly motherfucker, you.
I was a poor white boy from Alabama.
Nothing wrong with that.
Don't be hating.
I ain't hating.
I didn't have all this fanciness that you did as a kid.
I didn't have it until I went up there.
So that makes you better than me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right, then.
So you talked a minute ago about trying to get Cornette kind of off to your own like it was with you and Pat. But there for a while, creative was pretty much just you and Cornette. From win to win, what were the good ideas? What were the bad ideas? What are your favorite memories of doing that?
Well, I'll tell you the funny thing. There were so many just little incidents that happened when we were writing by ourselves. We weren't writing by ourselves. We were actually writing with Vince from time to time. And I remember one day we were at Vince's house, and Cornette hated going to Vince's house too because of the traffic on the Merritt Parkway. Absolutely drove him insane. But every morning it was just a chore. I bought a house in Monroe, Connecticut. The idea in my head was that we would go to my house and work out of my house in Monroe. So I told Corny, get a house, get someplace up in Monroe, which is 45 minutes on a good day to get to the office. But I didn't want to be close to the office because when you're close to the office, you get called into the office a lot. And I liked working out of my house. So Cornette gets a place right not too far from where I was. And we were working at my house. We had a little deal. But I think one of the funniest things was when we would get stuck, we started out the first time and we wrote a pay-per-view. I forget which pay-per-view it was, but at the end of each match, you would write down on the run sheet at the end of the match, okay, boom, so-and-so goes over, music on out. So whenever we would get stuck, we would just look at each other and kind of go, okay, music on out. That was our next transition. That's how punchy you kind of get in writing things. But anyway, we get together with Vince one day, and this is before Corny had made the move, and there's no Cornette. So I called Jim. Jim was in Sanford, living in the high-rise at this point. I said, hey, man, where are you? You going to make it in? Oh, goddamn. George died. I'm like, oh, my God, Corny. What do you mean George died? So to give you a little backstory, George was a rat. Do you remember the Mankind vignettes?
Yes.
Do you remember the rat that Mankind had in the original vignettes in the little cell, the Mankind original vignettes with the rat crawling around, crawling all over him?
Are you about to tell me that was Jim Cornette's rat?
That was Jim Cornette's rat, George.
Wait. Is that the first rat Jim Cornette ever had?
That was the first rat that Jim Cornette ever had that had huge balls.
And 4 legs.
Okay.
All right.
So Jimmy had a pet rat. His name was George.
Who in the business didn't have a pet rat?
There you go. And one of the things that was particularly peculiar about this rat was his large testicles. But I'm calling Cornette on this one day, and George had passed. George had left us. I said, well, oh, man, I'm sorry about that. Well, goddamn, it's terrible. He was sick, and we took him to the vet, and the vet was just beside himself, and they had to do surgery. I said, wait a minute, stop. Corny. You mean to tell me that you took a fucking rat to a vet in Stamford, Connecticut, and they said the rat was sick, but that they could do surgery and make him better?
Well, fuck yeah, what would you do if it was one of your loved ones?
Sorry.
This was so sad. And he described how the rat was laying there and George was there. They had like a little apparatus and they breathed for him during the procedure.
You're fucking making this up.
I swear to God on my children's head.
And the nurse sat there and she puffed little breaths into George's mouth so he could breathe and continue to breathe through the operation, through the surgery. But he didn't make it. He died.
$1,100 for a rat surgery.
I thought the purpose of the rats was surgery.
Okay.
I thought they were.
No. And so Corny missed about 6 weeks worth of work, mourning the rat and laying in bed and holding the box. So being the asshole that I am, I know that's hard to believe. I'm like, all right, man. So what now? So what'd you do? Did they just throw the rat away, or did you guys flush it, or what?
Fuck you, goddammit! I'll kill you, motherfucker!
So, well, Corny, what do you do with a dead rat?
Right now, we've got him in the freezer.
So, George died. They got the body.
The body.
They got the body. From the vet.
The body.
They put it in a Ziploc, put it in a fucking shoebox, and put him in the freezer. So that he can
next to the ice cream.
Next to the ice cream and next to the frozen pizza and everything else. So that he can have a proper burial in the Carolinas or Kentucky or wherever the fuck George came from. And so he could be buried with the rest of his rat family. I'm not ribbing. This is a true story. Corny, tell the story on your thing if you want to, but he was distraught and missed work over the rat dying. Very distraught. Because Cornette's a sensitive son of a bitch, man.
Oh, yeah. So, do we know why the rat died?
Maybe it had mesothelioma. But if you know or have a loved one who has suffered from mesothelioma, there's only one place that you need to go. You got to go check out our friends over at rgt4law.com for any legal need. Check them out over at rgt4law.com.
Did you know there are billions of dollars set aside for asbestos victims and their families? If you or a loved one has been affected by mesothelioma or an asbestos-related cancer, you can call 855-748-4529 for a free consultation. That's 855-748-4529. Or visit rgtforlaw.com for more information. Robert Taylor, RG Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
I'll tell you another, this was another one, a good one. When we would work at the house, my wife would come in and oftentimes go and get us lunch. And she would say, okay, what do you guys want? And Corny would, I want a goddamn cheesesteak. I want this. I want extra cheese, double mayo, extra onion. And she would say, what do you want that on? Because you go to a deli, they always ask you, hey, what do you want that on? So you want that on a hard roll? What the fuck is the fascination over Yankee motherfuckers and your hard bread? I like soft bread. I like spongy bread that I can put my teeth into. I don't want any hard bread. Why the fuck would you want a hard bread? You bite into the goddamn bread up here and it's fucking hard. I hate hard bread. You know what a hard roll is?
Yeah.
It's just a soft roll, but it's named a hard roll up in Yankeeville. They got shit fucked up. And that always just tickled the fuck out of my wife that he thought that the hard rolls were actually hard. Yeah. And then there was a time that Jake worked with us and they used to ask Corny to go by and pick Jake up at the hotel.
So this is 96 when he comes back?
Yeah, roughly at that time.
Okay.
And, and drove Cornette nuts because he had to drive about 30 minutes out of his way to go back into Stamford to go pick Jake up, then to come back through Stamford to get back on the Merritt Parkway to go to Greenwich. And finally, he made the plea to me and Ben. God damn! Jake didn't have a driver's license.
Yeah.
And so, goddamn, somebody else pick him up. Is there another way? And somehow Jake figured out another way to get to work without Corny having to.
Was it a rib of you guys? I mean, you knew you were fucking with him to do it?
No, it was simply that it was.
Hey, you're the new guy. Go fucking get him.
Well, they had a relationship.
Jake.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Corny. Okay, so Cornette gets this beautiful house. Beautiful house.
In Connecticut.
In Connecticut. He's renting it.
Okay.
Gorgeous. One of the big, like open fucking windows lets a lot of the natural light in and shit. Gorgeous.
All right, you're mentioning the windows for a reason. Let's hear it.
Well, you go over there and it's like, what the fuck? And you see from the outside, man, and you walk in and every window is blacked out with black construction paper.
No.
What do you mean no?
You're making that
You
up.
weren't there. I'm sorry, Dave Meltzer. No, he did not have it.
Is he fucking cooking meth in there? What's he blacking it out for?
The light hurts my eyes. How the fuck can you get any sleep? Goddamn light shining through, motherfuckers.
He's a vampire.
Essentially.
Huh.
So he had every window in this beautiful home blacked out with black construction paper.
I'm not gonna spend any goddamn money on drapes on a fucking rent house.
True story. And he also took every light bulb and changed the lights to pink lights because they were softer.
Wait. Not like a clear light or a soft white,
Pink.
but a pink.
Pink. Kind of like Bret Hart. Dun, 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 dun,
Was he single at the time?
Yeah.
Cornette was doing some wild shit in there.
Hey, man, more power to him.
Did you ever, are you going to share the story about the time you went to Cornette's house?
No, not that one.
Let's talk a little bit about 1996, because this is a year where we see Cornette doing lots of managerial stuff, most notably with Big Van Vader. He has the Shawn Michaels feud that went sideways. Hear all about that in our Vader episode in the archives. You can also hear the moment where it went wrong and what Cornette thought about Shawn in that situation. But 96 is also the year where we saw the curtain call happen. And it's not as if Jim Cornette has ever been short on opinions. What did Jim think of the curtain call?
Went fucking banana. It was me, Corny, and Vince that night riding with Vince. And
let's catch everybody up. The curtain call was May 19th, 1996 at Madison Square Garden. The Clique, which at the time was made up of Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, who was working as Diesel, Scott Hall, who was working as Razor Ramon, Sean Waltman, who was working as the 1-2-3 Kid, and Triple H, who was working as Hunter Hearst Helmsley, were known as the Clique. And on this night, it was the last time that Hall and Nash would be a part of the group. And they had an incident where they broke character. So there's good guys and bad guys in the ring together, hugging, raising each other's hands to close the show at the home arena for the company, Madison Square Garden. And this happened on May 19th, 1996. Continue your story.
well, it just, I think that the narrative on that has changed so much over the years, and you have to understand the time and the mentality of those in the business that had spent our entire life protecting the livelihood and the sanction, the sanctimony of the business. And what took place with Shawn Michaels as our babyface champion. It just had this grueling cage match with the evil villain Diesel and beat the shit out of him and super kicked him. And then Diesel's out flat, laying in the middle of the ring selling. And then Shawn gets over him, reaches down, kisses him, and Diesel miraculously comes to with the, and no sells everything that they just did. And they hug and kiss. And then Razor and Triple H come out, who had worked earlier in the night. and they all hug and do a curtain call, a bow. So it was appalling to those of us who had been in the business forever, and it just was something that had never been done, and something that guys do practically every goddamn show now. Some form of this in some way or shape or form, but at that time wasn't cool.
Sure.
And Cornette was beside himself. Cornette was upset. Cornette wanted to fire everybody. The only ones left to fire were Shawn and Triple H.
Was he in Vince's ear?
Oh yeah. I mean, we both were, we both went off. We had, dinner at Smith and Walensky's that night, but the theme was one of that. It wasn't just a fuck you to the rest of the boys, but it was kind of to do it in Madison Square Garden, where Vince's dad and his grandfather and everybody had promoted before was, we just looked at that as spitting in Vince's family's face and took it personal. And I try not to take the business so seriously anymore. But yeah, Cornette was beside himself. He was pretty pissed off. He wanted to fire everybody.
What would that have sounded like?
Fucking fire the motherfuckers, goddamn non-drawing motherfucker. The goddamn My Little Pony fucking sidekick motherfucking champion. I'd have him drop the goddamn belt to the Brooklyn Brawler tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's just that kind of shit.
1996.
The first match, 1, 2, 3.
1996 was also the year that you got married.
I did.
Recently celebrated your anniversary. Happy belated anniversary to you and the missus.
Yeehaw. WrestleMania 12.
I bring that up because I think I have this right. Once upon a time, you guys had like a little get together for some people from the office, and it was to commemorate your wedding, but it wasn't the actual wedding. And there was a meal.
No, it was actual wedding. Cornette came to my wedding.
Well, let's hear that story, because I knew I had some details screwed up, but you've told me this before. And it's a good time.
Oh my God. Well, we were in line at Caesar's Palace, checking in, and Vince says to me, "Hey pal, what are we doing after?" And I hadn't really given it any thought. We were getting married at the Little White Chapel there in Vegas, and I just thought, well, probably 20 of us would just come back to the bar and have a few drinks. Maybe find some place to eat, go get a bite to eat. Who knows? And Vince's like, "Well, you mind if I do anything for you?" Like, sure, do whatever you want. And Vince put together, he got a nice private room at the Palm in Caesars. And we had like 22 people, 24 people, whatever it was. And just put on this spread for us. And everybody got to order off the menu, but they had, just every appetizer in the world and so on and so forth. But before they brought out appetizers, they went around and got everybody's entree order. Well, we're sitting there and they bring out all the appetizers. So my wife and I are sitting kind of in the middle of everybody, and it was a big room, and the tables all went around kind of in a square. And directly across from us is Jim and his significant other at the time. But before I know it, Corny's over my shoulder. It's like, "Goddamn, we gotta go." "What do you mean you gotta go?" I was, "Fuck, man, they're just bringing out appetizers now, man. We haven't even eaten yet." "Well, goddamn, the garlic." What are you talking about? "The garlic. She smells the garlic. We gotta go. The garlic. We can't do garlic. She smells the garlic. We gotta go." And I ordered a goddamn fucking T-bone. I got baked potatoes. I got goddamn all gratin potatoes. I got this. I was gonna get this for dessert. I was like, well, just sit. But his significant other at the time smelled the garlic, and they had to leave. So Cornette left his entire meal and went back and ate room service because it smelled of garlic. Can't make this shit up.
No, you can't. 96 is also notable because I believe this is the year that Vince Russo joins the creative team. Is that right?
About that time, yeah. Well, it was Russo had been doing the magazine, and we had debuted the Raw magazine sometime in there. But I was looking for help, and I wanted more heads to help us out with writing television and what have you. So Vince Russo had always shared ideas and always loved to talk the business. So I thought, hey man, let's have Russo sit in with us. So Russo sat in a few times, and right about this time, Shane McMahon got married. But the turning point for me was when J.J. Dillon walked out and J.J. Dillon quit. Corny and I were at the house, and we were writing TV, and I get a phone call, and it was Vince McMahon, and he says, Bruce, J.J. Dillon is resigned and is no longer with the company. Jim Ross was in South Africa. Jerry Briscoe was in South Africa. We had a tour over there. And this was like on a Thursday. Shane McMahon's wedding was on that Saturday. It's just funny how you remember time frame on all this shit. And Corny and I stopped everything we were doing. We came into the office and like, okay, what the fuck? What are we going to do? So on and so forth. And that was the turning point where Vince asked me to essentially take over what JJ was doing in talent relations. In doing that, there was so much there to do, and I wasn't good at it, didn't like it, didn't want to do it, but he didn't want to put JR in that spot at that time because JR was negotiating with WCW, and it was one of those deals where JR really wanted it. Back then he wanted it so bad, Vince wasn't going to give it to him. Even though he was the better man for that job. I did it. And in doing that, I wasn't able to devote as much time to the creative television writing and everything. So Vince stepped back into the creative end of shit, and we started, we put Russo and had Russo be a more frequent guest in the writing. And eventually it just became where I couldn't participate in a lot of that creative, and it became Vince Russo and the team of Vince Russo and Jim Cornette was born. Thank you, J.J. Dillon. So, Corny, when you get all pissed off about shit and start going off, it's JJ's fault.
So, how long did that last before they hated each other?
They probably hated each other before that really took place, but it didn't take long before Cornette and Russo were at odds, because Russo being, a New York Yankee and having a completely different viewpoint on the business of wrestling, and feeling that Cornette's ideas and Cornette's views on the business were antiquated and Southern hick, and that the center of the world is New York. They clashed almost immediately.
Vince McMahon is a guy who usually is able to put, let bygones be bygones, and wants to just cut through all the bullshit just for what's best for business, pardon the pun. It feels like he would have thought this was a waste of time and energy. Did he ever try to get these guys to soothe it out and smooth it over?
I think that Vince thrives on the chaos and thrives on the conflict.
Sure.
So that was probably for him. He probably encouraged some of that and liked it because it wasn't two guys that shared the exact same ideas. So he liked to hear the different viewpoints, and then he would try and weigh in somewhere in the middle. But, there was a point there where I was asked, and I don't remember if it was Vince McMahon or Jim Ross or somebody that was like, maybe Bruce, you're friends with both Cornette and you're friends with Russo. Maybe you can kind of help smooth this thing over and get these guys together and not make them shake hands and be friends, but get them in a different setting. Get them around each other. Find some common ground, if you will. So I had a barbecue at my house on a Sunday afternoon. Invited, I believe I had Jim and Jan Ross over, and Vince Russo and his wife and his 2 kids, or 3 kids, and we had a nice little cookout. Jim Cornette came, and Cornette hates kids. Hates them. God damn, what the fuck are they good for? Snot-nosed little motherfuckers. But I'm trying to get Corny in a different environment and get him to see Russo as a human being and vice versa. So during this time, it was the same day that I fed Vince Russo's son VJ dog ice cream. The Frosty Paws.
Yeah.
Yeah, we fed that to his youngest son, and then convinced him after the fact that he was going to grow a tail and become a dog. Which to a 4 or 5-year-old, that's traumatic.
Your wife having dog ice cream does not surprise me. You convincing a child he's going to grow a tail also does not surprise me.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Business as usual at the Prichard household.
Business as usual at the Prichard household. So Cornette, who's kind of had his fill of children and family time and, happy, joy. I had my backyard at the time was about the size of a football field. And way in the back of the backyard, I had a hammock underneath these 2 gigantic trees. And it was just the wind came through. It was cool and comfortable. And it had nice little padding on the hammock and all this. And Cornette sees this. And he's like, oh, heaven. It was far enough out where he couldn't hear the kids yelling and screaming and what have you. And he traipses out to the hammock and lays on the hammock. He ignores all of us and goes out to be by himself. So anybody knows Jim Cornette knows that, when Jim puts his mind to it, he can fall asleep fairly quickly. So we gave him probably about 20, 30 minutes, made sure that he was good in slumberland, probably getting some good REM. And for some reason, I had super soakers at the house. And those damn kids might have found those. And if you can imagine a 4-year-old kid and a 6-year-old kid, or however old they were, but they were young, traipsing out and trying not to laugh and trying to be quiet, and they go all the way out, run all the way out to the thing, and they open up on Jim Cornette with these super soakers. And a super soaker gives you that one big stream of water, and it doesn't stop
till it's empty.
And they hit Corny until the damn things were empty. And it was absolutely fabulous. Corny took a bump out of the hammock, chased the kids, and of course they're kids, and Corny's corny. He can't run. But I think to this day he hasn't forgiven those little bastards for that.
Corny cussing kids is going to be awesome.
Goddamn little motherfuckers, I'll kill you both. I'll skin you when I catch you. If I ever catch you. I'll find out where you sleep and wake you up. And then I'll skin you. If I can hold you down, bastard. And your Yankee father, motherfucker. Fuck him too. So that was just one more reason for Corny to hate Vince Russo.
All right, so lots of stuff. Let's briefly cover 1997. Lots of stuff happening in the WWF in 1997. The rise of Steve Austin, the turn of Bret Hart, the Hart Foundation, the problems behind the scenes with Shawn and Bret, the screw job, lots and lots and lots of stuff going on. Real quick, Corny would have been, in my head, a huge proponent of the push of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Fair to say?
Yeah, fair to say. Everybody was.
I feel like he'd have loved the anti-American Bret Hart as well.
Not as much as he loved the All-American Patriot.
That's what I want to talk about. So there's this famous clip out there of a Jim Cornette shoot where he talks about a situation, we'll say, with Kevin Dunn. Can you catch everybody up on this Patriot Kevin Dunn conversation? You were there. People have heard for years Cornette's version. What's Bruce Prichard's version?
Okay. Well, it starts out, it was during a time that the company was having some challenging financial times. So we were trying to save money any way that we could. One of the ways to save money, especially when you're going into Nova Scotia, is if you fly on a Saturday and you stay over on a Saturday night, your trip, which would normally, like, for example, to go in and do Raw, and if you went in on a Sunday night and came back on a Tuesday, the trip may be $1,000. However, if you go in on a Saturday, you keep that Saturday night stay over, your trip may be $200 because of the Saturday night stay. So it was decided that everyone going to TV would have to go into Nova Scotia on a Saturday afternoon, spend Saturday night there and Sunday, and then do Raw on Monday night and do the TV after the fact to save money. And you say, well, you got a hotel, you got all that other shit. All that other shit, it was still cheaper doing that than going out on a Sunday night. And so everybody had to do it. So now everybody's got to leave home 2 days early to go to Nova Scotia. You ever been to Nova Scotia?
I don't plan to go anytime soon.
Well, it's beautiful in the summer, but that's all I got to say about that. To add insult to injury, we get into Nova Scotia, and Vince wants to have a production meeting. So what else you going to do? You know, I mean, hey, you're in Nova Scotia, you got to leave home early. Well, let's work. Let's have a meeting. Let's have a meeting about having a meeting. And we're sitting in this meeting room.
Let me catch everybody up here. This is probably happening in July of 1997.
Sounds about right.
There was a couple of dates there, July 20th in Sydney, Nova Scotia, and then the next day in Halifax, Nova Scotia. That was July 20th and 21st, 1997. Sorry about that. Keep going.
And I think we were at Halifax. I think we based ourselves out of Halifax. I don't really remember exactly, but we were in a meeting, and it was the usual suspects in this agent meeting because everybody had to be there early. And Cornette goes on talking, and at some point, KD might have said something along the lines of, Jim, you're just tiresome. Which I guess went up Corny's ass sideways with red hot poker. And Corny immediately shot back. Let me tell you something, you Bugs Bunny looking motherfucker. And the whole room just kind of goes silent. Because, it just was a personal attack. And granted, KD probably started it with his comment about, well, Jim, you're tiresome, and they hated each other. Man, every chance that Cornette had to dig Kevin, he did. Every chance that Kevin had to make a comment about Southerners and you're just too Southern and that Southern comments, and they just drove each other absolutely nuts. So with the Bugs Bunny comment, and Cornette stands up, and I remember me and Jerry Briscoe having to escort Cornette out of the room and just go, come on, Jimmy, let's go. And it wasn't like anybody was going across the table at anybody. It just was uncomfortable, unnecessary, and just kind of fucked up. But here's the fucked up part. Cornette gets sent to his room, okay? Well, now this motherfucker doesn't have to go to any more of the meetings. He gets to go to his room and relax and chill out and have room service and watch TV. We're still stuck in the meetings. And we break up that meeting and we go to lunch. And one of the funniest fucking things, man, Jim Ross, me, Jerry Briscoe, and Vince all sit down at a table. And Vince looks at JR and says, "God damn, JR, you got a problem on your hands with Cornette." And JR's like, "What the fuck? Why don't you have a goddamn problem?" But it was absolutely hilarious because it was, hindsight being 2020, it was kind of funny being there. And JR having to deal with it after the fact. I was just happy I didn't have to deal with it. But
Kevin Dunn would never be Jim Cornette's favorite person.
Ever. No.
Why would that be? That's independent of this meeting.
Because he was a Southerner. He just hated Cornette.
So it wasn't so much that Cornette hated Kevin Dunn. It's that Kevin Dunn hated Cornette.
Oh, it was mutual. It was definitely mutual. They couldn't stand the sound side of each other. Absolutely. That was just pure hatred.
And neither one respected what the other one could do.
At all.
Totally thought the other one was full of shit.
Yes. Couldn't stand each other. Couldn't stand the side of each other. Couldn't stand the sound of each other's voice.
Do you think it is, not trying to beat Jim up here, but do you think it's fair that Cornette has continually called him Bucky Beaver motherfucker and made fun of the teeth and did all these crazy impressions over the years?
That's Jim.
That feels way out of character for him, because normally, if that's not his deal, he'll fuck with you about your stupid ass opinion more so than your teeth.
Yeah, but again,
that just shows me it's like personal. Like he fucking hates him.
Yeah, it is. It's personal on both ends. But to me, it's silly personal.
Yeah.
I think that there comes a point where
when you're just busting on somebody's teeth, it's like, fuck, dude.
Yeah, get over it.
You're reaching.
Get over it. They're both very good at what they do, and it's just it's gotten to the point of ridiculousness and silliness, and I think that Corny does it because it's a good topic. It's like,
oh, for sure, people want to hear it.
Yeah, fuck with Russo, fuck with Kevin Dunn because it's entertaining, and his story and his recollection of it is absolutely entertaining and funny as shit.
Can you give us any sort of instance where you could see that you would side with Cornette and that Kevin Dunn had fucked some shit up?
Fuck shit up in what way?
In any way. Can you say anything critical of Kevin Dunn at all right now, or are your balls in a jar in Stamford, Connecticut?
No, I think from Kevin's point of view, I think that Kevin could be absolutely fucking brutal with some of his opinions and the way that he would talk to people, especially during live TV. He sat in the truck and could just be positively ruthless of you stupid motherfucker and just browbeating people from the production.
Not like in a funny way like me and you do here, but like for real.
No, for real.
Okay.
But, and again, it's going to sound like I'm defending him, but you have to understand the pressure, and it is kind of like when you and I get hot at you, fuck you, dumb son of a bitch. His could be more mean-spirited.
But he meant it the same way we do.
I think that he probably did. That was his way of communicating.
Okay.
And coming up in that era, in that time.
With Vince McMahon.
With Vince McMahon, man, that's how you communicated sometimes. You had to.
Yeah.
You had to be that asshole, and you needed that asshole. So.
And Jim Cornette took the brunt of that one too many times for his liking.
But Jim's shit, man, and it got personal because it was that Southern shit, and it was it came across as demeaning. It came across as I'm better than you because you're just a stupid Southern hick. And Corny's a lot of things, but he's not stupid.
No.
And he is a Southern hick, but he's a pretty fucking creative and fucking smart Southern hick.
Now, in fairness,
hillbilly motherfucker.
Not a lot of people you can say Southern hick about and then be as liberal as Jim. Jim, while he may be from the South, certainly doesn't have all like traditional Bible Belt opinions on stuff.
No, absolutely not. Jim, this was my comparison. People used to ask me to describe Jim Cornette. And I used to say that Paul Heyman and Jim Cornette, they're one and the same. Paul Heyman is just a sophisticated Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette is just a hillbilly version of Paul Heyman. Both brilliant, both great at what they do. One's from New York, one's from Kentucky. But I think that what it boils down to with the KD, JC, just conflict was it was personal, and it was stemming from Kevin could come across as very demeaning and mean-spirited in that, that Southern hick shit. Oh, that wrestling. All Kevin's ever known is WWF.
Right.
He's never been experienced anything else. And anything else that he has been experienced to or exposed to was usually tarnished by Vince's opinion before ever seeing it or experiencing it.
Sure.
Goddamn Southern wrestling. Tennessee wrestling.
So he's jaded there.
Sure.
But it was, that's what it was, man. It just was silly.
Let's talk about silly. There's some fun stories. Let's get on something a little more lighthearted, something a little funnier. 2 quick stories I'd like for you to help us share. This is not in my notes anywhere, but I know you've told me these before. Jim Ross tells a story of Cornette being stopped at the border.
Oh my God.
You've told me a story about the way Cornette handles his room and hotel rooms with the wait staff and the maid services. And then finally, I know there was an incident, or I believe there was an incident where you guys were shooting something during a hardcore match, or it was a backstage vignette or skit, and it involved Cornette's car.
Oh.
So catch us up on those, and we'll start with the last one first. Cornette's car. What happened?
Atlantic City, New Jersey. We were shooting television, and we were live. They pre-taped a fight between the Boricuas and the Nation of Domination.
So 1997.
Okay. And they were in the parking lot where all the talent and everybody, the staff, parked out by the television trucks. And there was a spot where the Godfather, at the time, took a bump on a car. And when he took a bump on the car, he rolled. And when he rolled onto the back window of the car. And just his weight, I mean, God, he was 320 pounds, but it was the right place, right time, right inertia, whatever. The back window just shattered and popped and exploded. Well, everybody thinks that, oh, hey, it was a gimmick car, and they planned on busting out the back window. No, it was a complete accident. It happened in the midst of this fight. He just took a bump. He thought he was going to kind of bump onto the car, but he rolled. And when he rolled onto the back window, and it exploded. So everybody, after they finished it all up, and everybody's standing around like, oh my God, we got to find out whose car that is. Whose car is that? Well, it's Connecticut plates or whatever plates there were on it. And they put 2 and 2 together. It's Jim Cornette's car. Well, Barry Windham I don't know if Barry was the agent. I think Barry was working at the time, but Barry had a little something to do with this. And everybody's like, oh my God, wait till Cornette sees this. He's going to fucking explode. And Barry says, well, why does he have to see it now? What if he didn't get to see it till it was live? And we get him up at Gorilla, and it's like, hey man, you got to see this fight. This fight was incredible. Wait till you see it. So we are live, and Cornette is at the Gorilla position, right next to me. And everybody's talking up this fight. Oh my God, this thing is great. And they get to the car spot, and he's like, oh my God, this fight is great. This is amazing. Son of a bitch. Oh, God damn. When they hit the windshield. Motherfucker, that's fucking great. This fight. Hey, what? That's my goddamn car. That's my goddamn car, Hey, that's my goddamn car. And he gets up.
Not a rental.
No, it's his personal fucking car. And he takes off to the back. And as he takes off to the back, he gets back there and he sees that his car, the back window, is shattered. He's so fucking mad. Now, he's not mad per se at the back window being busted out. He's mad that he had to watch it live and that nobody told him. So he goes to get into the trunk. And as he goes to get into the trunk,
You're saying open the trunk. You don't mean he's climbing in his own trunk.
Well, yeah, get into it. Open the trunk. Well, they know what I'm fucking talking about.
Somebody's going to fucking tweet us if I don't clarify.
Okay. So he goes in, and of course, because everybody has a baseball bat in their trunk.
And everybody cuff key.
Of course. So Cornette takes a baseball bat out because he's ready to air out the rest of his goddamn car. Because I guess that's what you do when the back window gets popped out of your car. You bash out the rest of your windows. And he starts taking a baseball bat to his car, bashing in the trunk, and going around and hitting his own car, his own vehicle, with a baseball bat. The Hebners come running out, and they're afraid that he's going to just start taking the baseball bat and attacking people, and they're trying to calm him down, and he can't get calmed down, and finally they get him to put the bat up, and Jimmy goes back into the building to get his bag, and he's out of there, and in between, Cornette says it was a janitor, but it was actually the manager of the building and his son, tried to stop Cornette for an autograph. Oh, hey, Jim Cornette, hey, can I get your autograph? Fuck you, you motherfucker! I'll kill you and your goddamn snot-nosed little motherfucking son! And fuck you, and fuck goddamn New Jersey, and fuck Atlantic City, and fuck it! A fuck you fest. Gets his bag, throws it in his car, and peels out of the parking lot. He's gone. This is before the age of cell phones, too. And even if they had cell phones, Cornette wouldn't have had one at that time. He leaves. He goes home. We don't hear from him for days. I call him, leave a message on his machine, doesn't call back. Vince calls him, leaves messages on his machine. He don't call back. Finally, about the third day, Jim Ross calls him. Corny, what we got to do, bud? You know, it was an accident. And finally, Jim talks to JR. And we agree, it's like, well, man, we'll take care of it. It was an accident. So we agreed to do his front and back window, because his front window was cracked and all this other shit. But I didn't get my goddamn trunk fixed because fucking I wanted a reminder of that goddamn night and the fucking bullshit. So he basically could have got a new car if he wanted it. But he wanted a reminder of that fucking night, so he left the bashed-in trunk. But the funniest part of all, to me, was when he finally talks to me. He says, you know what the worst part was? On the way home, I hadn't eaten all goddamn day. And so I pull into a fucking rest area because I got to get gas. And I'm starving. I want to go in and get one of the goddamn Roy Rogers, the fucking roast beef sandwiches, get some extra goddamn mayo, some fucking horsey sauce, and some goddamn onions, put on my goddamn roast beef sandwich. But I couldn't leave my goddamn car because the fucking back window's bashed in. So I said, well, fuck, I'll just lock all my shit up in the goddamn trunk. But my trunk wouldn't lock because I bashed in the trunk with a baseball bat. So I couldn't even go in the goddamn Roy Rogers and get my goddamn roast beef because I couldn't leave my goddamn car in a goddamn Yankee motherfucking goddamn parking lot, motherfuckers. Fuck. And I'm laughing. And he's getting mad. The more I laugh, the madder he gets. But that was the funniest part to me, was the fact that he decided to get a goddamn roast beef sandwich. And there are no goddamn drive-thrus that are open in the middle of the fucking night. Goddamn Yankeeville motherfuckers.
So while we're talking about Cornette and cars, there's a story where Cornette is traveling north and gets stopped at the Canadian border.
Well, okay. There was that one, but also the famous one was Jim and JR traveling to Vancouver, and they fly across country. Well, as we've discussed, Jim is terrified of the death tube, and goddamn, I gotta walk the fucking gangplank and then get in a goddamn death tube to fucking go hundreds of fucking miles, and I hate fucking flying. So he would Xanax himself up to just be a piece of jello on the plane. He would time it so that he knew when to take his Xanax, so that he wasn't really conscious during the takeoff, and he would just come to right at the end, right about the time it was to land. He knew how many he had to take for however long the flight was. Well, on this one trip, he's going across country with JR, and he didn't misjudge, but he took the Xanax, and the flight, he fell asleep, passed out on the plane. Well, the fucking plane's delayed like 2.5 hours at the gate. So Corny's and he gets up in the air. Well, he wakes up early. There's still like 3.5 hours left in his fucking flight. And his Xanax worn off, and he doesn't have any more to take. And they hit turbulence. And he's got JR sitting next to him. He's like, goddamn, JR, talk to me. Just talk to me. Fucking, oh my God, I'm freaking out. Just talk to me. JR tells a story where, goddamn, man, Corny's telling me, sing to me. Corny says he just wanted him to talk to him. But when they get to the Canadian border, They landed in Seattle or wherever they landed, and then they had to drive, and they had to go across the Canadian border, and these motherfuckers are picking like every other car to search. And they pick Corny's car. So they ask them to get out, and they go through their bags, and Cornette just goes, you goddamn Dudley Do-Right-looking motherfucker, why you go through my shit? I don't want you touching my shit, motherfucker. Goddamn it, you motherfucking Canadian goddamn cocksucking bastards. And he wonders why he was detained at the fucking border. Just saying. So that was the story. He mistimed his Xanax and woke up in the middle of the flight and came to, and it was a horrifying ordeal. What was the other one? There were 3.
Cornette and his situation or his policy and procedures with the hotel rooms.
Oh.
And the maid staff.
Oh my God. Well, first thing Corny would do anyway, he liked staying at goddamn Red Roof Inn so I could pull my fucking car up right to the goddamn door, get my shit out, put my shit in, have my car right there, and I fucking walk through the goddamn hallway in one of those fucking hotels, see people, fuck that. Turn the goddamn air conditioner on to freezing, freeze my goddamn room out. But if Cornette were staying in a hotel for like 2, 3, 4, 5 days, he wouldn't get maid service. You know why? I don't want anybody touching my shit. Oh, go through your shit. I don't want them touching my shit, motherfuckers. So he would have fucking 4 or 5 days, goddamn pizza boxes and fucking Wendy's wrappers and goddamn dirty sheets and filthy fucking towels and everything else, and not let a maid come in and clean his fucking room. Can you imagine what that thing looked like after 5 days? What it smelled like.
So he doesn't want people to see him carrying his stuff in, and he doesn't want the staff to mess with his stuff.
They touch your shit. I don't want going through my shit. Saying.
What kind of shit was he worried about them going through?
I don't know, but here's the counter to that. Paul Heyman. Exactly the same thing, sir. You cannot trust the help in the hotels. I will not allow them in my room. I keep the do not disturb. Do not come into my room. Do not attempt to change my sheets or vacuum my floor or take my dirty dishes out. I will air dry, whore. I need not your clean towels.
I was not ready for that.
That is what a blow dryer is for. Honey, get my back.
Catch me up about Cornette in traffic I feel like Cornette sitting in traffic or Cornette riding with Vince McMahon, but you've shared your fair share of stories of riding with Vince. Did Cornette ever have to ride with Vince, and what would that be like?
Oh, Lord. What happened? We started, I think, in Cleveland, or we took a flight to Cleveland, catching a flight, and in the middle of the flight, we're all sitting in first class. I'm sitting next to Vince. Cornette and Jim Ross were there. Lisa Wolf was on the flight. I forget whoever the hell else was on the flight. But I'm sitting on the window. Vince is in the aisle. And we hit weather. Something happens that we are not allowed to land where we were going. The weather's too bad. We can't get there. So they circle. They decide to reroute us to Albany. And they're circling Albany. Well, Vince has decided to take a power nap. So he's out. He doesn't know any of this shit's going on. He wakes up and he's hungry. Now, because the flight was originally only scheduled to be like an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever it was, all they had was a little snack which consisted of a muffin and a banana. That was the snack food in first class. So Vince wakes up, he hits the flight attendant call button, and flight attendant comes back, says, "You have any food?" And she just comes and hands him this basket of a banana and a muffin.
Like, this is it?
Well, yes, sir. And he looks at his watch. Goddamn, what's going on? And he rings the flight attendant, and she just blows right by. She doesn't stop. So he's looking around, rings the flight attendant button again. She comes back, "Yes, sir." This is what are we doing here? So we were supposed to land like 30, 45 minutes ago. What's going on? And she just walks away, doesn't answer. And I'm sitting right next to him. I witnessed the whole damn thing. And he's looking at me going, "What the hell's going on?" I said, "I don't know. They said they had something going on in the weather and that we were circling Albany."
Why the fuck are we circling Albany?
"I don't know." So he rings the flight attendant button again. And he says, "What's going on?" She just ignores us, doesn't answer. So he gets up and goes up and asks to speak to the captain. "I'd like to know what the hell's going on." Well, man, it fucking turns into this whole big ordeal. The captain comes back. "Yes, sir." He says, "Yeah, could you tell me what's going on here? I've tried to ask this young lady a couple of times, and she has no answer for me." And the guy explains, "Hey, we got weather. We're circling right now. When we get clearance to land, we're going to land in Albany, but we can't go. I forget what our destination was. So when we'll land, be good." And that's it. I mean, that was the extent of the communication. Well, man, they call the fucking feds on us, on an unruly passenger. Now, if it had been United, they'd beaten the fuck out of him and drug him off the plane and probably thrown him off the fucking flight. But then again, it was different time, different place. But when we land, man, the federal marshals are all standing there, and Vince gets off and gets on his phone, and we're trying to find a car company so that we can drive to the next place. And the feds are all surrounding him, and they question us about all this bullshit about, "Sir, you threatened a flight attendant, you threatened the captain." And I'm listening to this going, man, he didn't threaten anybody. He asked a question. Why are we circling? Why haven't we landed yet? That's it. He was asleep when the announcement was made. And they fucking make a report, write all this bullshit up. So now we're late getting where we got to go. Weather's bad, and Vince is going to drive. And it's Vince, me, Cornette, and Jim Ross. And Vince is in a hurry. And as I told the story about him going about 140 miles an hour in the pouring rain, that's exactly what he's doing here. And I remember Jim Ross made the comment afterwards, "That last time I ride with you, old man, goddamn, I got kids, and I'd like to see them. I'd like to see them again." I can't travel like this. And Cornette said, goddamn motherfucker, I'll never fucking travel with you again. I'll fucking die before I fucking get in a car with you behind the wheel ever again. And that was the last time that Cornette ever fucking rode with Vince driving. He was absolutely scared. If he thought that flying in a goddamn death tube was bad, being in a car with Vince McMahon behind the wheel in weather late somewhere is even worse.
Well, Jim was he's a pretty brave driver himself, though. Didn't you tell me there were a few times where you guys would have your plane delayed because of weather and Jim would beat you to the town driving?
That bastard one time, as he stated, he goes, goddamn, I had to walk the fucking gangplank onto the goddamn death tube, motherfucker. He gets on the plane, and it's one of those small jets with one seat on one side on the left side and two on the other.
Yeah.
And he walks on. We're already on the plane. And Corny walks on, looks, goes back, tries to sit down, but can't sit down. And he's cussing the whole way and goes, goddamn, I'm not going to die on this fucking death tube. I'm out of here. And bolts. Gets off the plane. And we're all sitting on the plane waiting for the son of a bitch to come back. He don't come back. And it's another situation where the weather was bad and so on and so forth. And we got delayed. We get off. And again, Jimmy didn't have a cell phone. We didn't have cell phones then. Jimmy's got a cell phone now. And you still can't reach on his cell phone. He's the only guy I know that actually answers his phone at home. But Cornette gets off the plane, rents a car, and drove 200 and some odd miles to the town and beat us there. He gets in at 1 o'clock in the morning. We don't get in until 4:30 in the morning.
Well,
and he gets there. He goes in and checks Prichard. Because Mr. Prichard hadn't checked in yet. Well, how about Jim Ross? Mr. Ross hasn't checked in yet. Vince McMahon, they're not here yet, sir. Beat us by 3.5 hours. And that motherfucker drove 200 miles. And we flew.
Well, time is flying in this episode. Let's get going. 1997 is where we last talked about, chronological things here. 97 at the end, man. It is a different era in professional wrestling. After the Montreal Screwjob, do you want to give me real quick Cornette's take on the Screwjob?
Yeah, Cornette was 100% on Vince's side. Fuck him, goddamn.
All right.
Just take that fucking title off the motherfucker. That's what I do.
He knew about it beforehand and he voted for it?
He didn't know about it beforehand, but he did make the suggestion ahead of time that just fuck him.
Okay.
Take the title off of him.
So not too long after this is when Vince says, we're going to stop insulting your intelligence. And he tries something that is pretty revolutionary at the time. It's the State of Wrestling. It's December 29th and it's 1997. And Cornette starts to do a series of shoot vignettes where he is, he's starting it up. And he would start saying something like, I'm Jim Cornette and that's my opinion. And he would have really long rants about Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff and WCW and the NWO and what they were presenting versus what the WWF was presenting. Whose idea was this? How much of this was approved ahead of time? Was Jim excited to do it or not so much? He had finished his managerial duties kind of in 1996. So by 97, he's pretty much just doing commentary and creative stuff, but this is a featured spot that's definitely going to get everybody talking. All the dirt sheets, all the websites. It will be the talk of the business for a few weeks here. Whose idea was it? Why did it go away? Give me something.
Did they even have websites then?
Yeah.
97?
Yeah.
The fuck out of here. We had computers then.
You still don't. You're not sure how to listen to this show.
True that. It was Vince McMahon's idea, and it simply came from the rantings of Jim Cornette on a daily basis. Bitching about WCW and bitching about Nitro and what they were doing. So Vince said, goddamn, let's put that on the air. Cornette wrote them and essentially spoke his mind, but it was the Jim Cornette rants that he ranted every week about WCW and Bischoff and the NWO.
And why did it go away?
I just kind of ran its course. enough was enough. Didn't feel it was really going anywhere. So as quickly as it appeared, it went away.
Let's zoom over to 1998. This is something that we've got a lot of requests for. It's the NWA Invasion, and it's loosely based on the old Crockett Promotions territory. There's a stable formed inside of the WWF with Jeff Jarrett, Barry Windham, and the Rock and Roll Express. And later in the year, Cornette would manage both Dan Severn and the Midnight Express when he steps back into managing. Eventually, as we said, he does some color commentary, Sunday Night Heat, and then just disappears from TV for a while before showing up a few years later, which we'll circle back to. But in regards to the NWA Invasion, Meltzer wrote, on the episode of Raw is War that was shown on January 5th, 1998, Jim Cornette brought NWA promoters / officials Howard Brody and Dennis Carluzzo to Raw and made a match between Jeff Jarrett and Barry Windham with the NWA North American Heavyweight Championship on the line. With the assistance of Jim Cornette and his tennis racket, Jeff Jarrett pinned Barry Windham in less than 4 minutes to win the title. Immediately after winning, Stone Cold Steve Austin, the most popular WWE superstar at the time, hit the ring to deliver a Stone Cold Stunner on Jarrett and then mock his strut. This move essentially killed the NWA angle before it even started. I can't understand why the WWE would make the NWA look so weak instantly, but having the apparent face of the NWA be fed to Austin. The Bleacher Report website would report, the year was 1998 and WCW was killing the WWF in the Monday Night Wars. They struck gold with the NWO takeover, and this left the WWF reeling. Enter the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance. McMahon was desperate, though, and brought in Dennis Carluzzo, the head of the NWA. Dennis, along with Jim Cornette, an NWA mainstay, brought the NWA titles with them, and that's where the angle was set to fail. Only the most hardcore wrestling fans knew about the long and fabled history of the NWA, leaving the casual wrestling fan of the day in the dark. Who cared about the NWA North American Heavyweight Championship? It was a title my grandpa probably knew and followed, but anything to gain ratings will do. Jeff Jarrett, a career mid-carder, defeated Blackjack Windham to win the NWA North American title after Cornette interfered on his behalf. Shortly thereafter, they were joined by the Rock and Roll Express, and the NWA stable was formed. The NWA World Tag Team Championship was awarded to the Rock and Roll Express by Jim Cornette. And then, as we know, the NWA champion Dan Severn made his debut, and the stable slowly died off as Windham would leave for WCW. Severn would turn his attention to a singles run, and that would leave only Cornette and the new Midnight Express, a team he said he hated working with, which was, do you remember?
Bombastic Bart and Beautiful Bob.
So catch me up on this NWA Invasion. How did this come about? Whose idea was it? Tell me about the title belt, Dennis Carluzzo, the Austin Stunner. Lots of stuff going on here with this NWA Invasion angle.
I want to say this was about the time that, Dennis Carluzzo, who was a promoter out of New Jersey, a good friend of Cornette's, Paul Lee had done the swerve on the NWA title and made his own ECW title and threw the NWA title in the trash and lied to Dennis Carluzzo. In Corny's mind, it was a way to bring Dennis Carluzzo whole, make him whole, I guess. And I'm paraphrasing here and I'm putting words in his mouth. But it was, God, the NWA was just a dead brand. It meant nothing. It meant less than nothing. It's three letters that, to me, meant something back in the day. But in 1997, meant less than nothing. It had been 20 years since the NWA had been relevant. So to try and capture anything there, it just wasn't. But, they tried something different and tried to bring these guys in and maybe see if something catches on. Do another brand, add another championship. I hated it because it was just more belts, making it more confusing.
quick correction. It was Bombastic Bob and Bodacious Bart.
Bodacious Bart, sorry.
With a name like Bodacious, who would ever imagine it wouldn't catch on?
Yeah, no shit.
You want to mention anything about Austin just burying Jarrett right away?
Well, what the fuck else are you going to put Jarrett over Austin? No, it was never something that was. It was never something that was planned to be this huge. Oh my God! I tell you what. Let's bring in an outside brand, the NWA, and have them go over all the WWF guys. That doesn't make any sense.
So let's debut them and squash them.
Well, there was never any idea there or any plan to go beyond that one little thing. So yeah.
Okay. So there you go. Sometimes we think that there should be more to it than that, but nope. When you're just doing it by the seat of your pants, it's not always the case. So by July 98, this angle that so many of you wanted to hear all this juice about, there's just nothing happening there. We'll probably explore that in greater detail at some point, I'm sure. Let's zip around a little bit. Let's go to Ohio Valley Wrestling. July of 1999, we see Cornette move back to Louisville. He finally gets out of Connecticut. And the idea about starting OVW allegedly comes up in a conversation with Danny Davis. What if we started an official developmental territory? Is that how you remember that going down?
At this point in Cornette's life, to quote him, he was a raw nerve end ready to explode. So Cornette had taken a vacation or something, and he was down in Kentucky visiting his mom, ran into Danny Davis, who was doing OVW wrestling out of Louisville, Kentucky. And the idea came to him, yeah, what if it was a way out? It was a way for us to have a developmental area and using OVW as a place that we could send guys to learn and guys to grow. Danny Davis is a great trainer, and the school was tremendous, but it was also an opportunity for Cornette to get out of Stanford.
I want to talk about Ohio Valley Wrestling on a future episode in long form. We're going to go really long on this Cornette episode, so we're going to have to cut this a little short.
We're going to go. We already have.
But previously, as everybody knows, the WWF had tried some developmental ties kind of loosely in Memphis, but that was what I would call low volume. And Ohio Valley is going to be a different approach. It's going to be like a real school, and they are going to have territories and talent exchanges. But a lot of this is going to be with Jim Ross helping sign new guys and sending them there to hone their craft on Cornette's watch. And there are lots of names who came through there that you'll recognize. The biggest of which are Brock Lesnar, John Cena, Randy Orton, Dave Bautista. The list goes on, but what a way to start with those four names, four of the biggest stars in the history of the business. There is a famous story, though, for whatever reason, it's kind of been swept under the rug as time's gone on, but Brock Lesnar was arrested while he was there for receiving steroids. Do you recall that?
I do.
Do you want to tell that story?
He was getting, I don't know if it was steroids or if it was growth or something like that. I really don't remember what it was, but he was receiving packages there in Louisville, and the feds had tracked it from wherever it was coming and went and met him when he accepted the package and brought him down and arrested him for a controlled substance. I think everything was dropped after that, and his lawyer there, and it turned out to be much ado about nothing.
It was a felony arrest and felony charge, but it was dismissed 4 months later. So nothing really came of it, which is why nobody really talks about it. But what everybody talks about of him down there is doing a shooting star press. Did you remember hearing that?
Oh, hell yeah. A big 300-pound bastard doing a shooting star press like it was nothing. It's absolutely amazing.
Also amazing is the time when he maybe pushed Cornette a little too far, and Cornette threatened to shoot a motherfucker. Can you tell us that story?
I don't remember. Cornette had to be crazy because Brock probably would have taken the gun and shoved it up his ass.
Now, of course, what everybody really wants to talk about is the firing of Jim Cornette in Ohio Valley Wrestling with the Boogeyman and Santino Marella. Do you remember this story?
I do remember this story.
Catch everybody up as to how this comes about. This is 2007. Do I have that right?
I guess sometime around there, but it was, Boogeyman was coming into Ohio Valley Wrestling, and he was just starting out down in OVW, and Corny had, him debuting on TV, but going out into the crowd and scaring everyone as the Boogeyman, I'm coming to get you. And Santino had just also started there in developmental, and he had come in, he had his daughter with him, and when Boogeyman came out with the gimmick and all this stuff, Santino laughed and, wasn't afraid of the Boogeyman. God forbid. And Cornette went off on him apparently in an after show tirade, and, allegedly slapped him. I guess he slapped Santino, and Santino being Santino. Now, the funny part about it is Santino's a tough son of a bitch.
In real life. Right.
I mean, yeah, he's a double tough motherfucker, man. And he just took it because, politically he didn't want to jeopardize any chances that he had of going to the show and being a part of the WWE. And to him, Cornette was, boss and executive and what have you. But when the issue got back to John Laurinaitis, I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and Johnny let him go. But I think at that point, Corny
he was ready. He was ready to go.
He was wound tighter than a $2 watch.
I'm sure if you haven't already, most people probably have, but you need to go find Jim Cornette telling this Boogeyman story. Man, nobody tells a story like Cornette. He was obviously there. Bruce wasn't. That Boogeyman story from Jim Cornette is outstanding. So eventually he sells the shares of his company, Ohio Valley Wrestling, back to its original owner, Danny Davis. And in February of 2008, the WWE would announce that they had ended their relationship with OVW as a developmental territory and would begin moving everything to Florida Championship Wrestling. That's the end of an era, don't you think? Ohio Valley was such a big part of WWE for so long.
Ohio Valley and that whole system there produced some of the greatest talent that is still performing in the WWE. And I always felt that was the heart and soul of that whole developmental program. And Danny Davis, Corny, and everybody involved in OVW, I thought, provided a service to the WWE that is yet to ever be matched with anyone. And I thought that was our best developmental territory and produced some of the greatest talent ever in the wrestling business, period.
It's worth mentioning that Cornette would work with TNA from 2006 to 2009. So I guess that Boogeyman shit happened before 07, and my guess was wrong. He would do some work with Ring of Honor from 2009 to 2012. In between there, he would do a little bit of work with OVW from 2010 to 2011. Catch me up real fast about any of your memories of Cornette discussing Ring of Honor with you. Do you remember having a conversation about that territory at all? I know you were never there, but he kind of has a somewhat famous, or infamous rather, cyber war or feud with the Young Bucks and Kevin Owens and all those guys.
No, it's funny. That's a period that Corny and I kind of, just kind of passed in the night because I never went there. I really don't know anybody from there, but Jim just was so disillusioned with the corporate muckety muck, if you will, and some of the young talent that relies heavily on, the spot monkeys, to steal a phrase from Broken Matt Hardy, and the guys, the younger talent that just had a different philosophy than what we grew up on. So I know he clashed heads with guys there, but no, I've never talked to him about it. And I that's just a period that I'm not really that familiar with.
Well, everybody is super familiar with all things Jim Cornette, but I want us to go out on a high point. And you've told me to ask you about this, but you didn't tell me exactly when. But you've told me there is a fun story about maybe the way Jim Cornette dresses and how Vince McMahon reacted to that once upon a time.
You know, Corny in general, quite the fashionista, I guess you could say. But Ric Flair got Corny started on Sansa belt pants because they stretch and you can take bumps in them and not have to worry about them splitting. But the best part was when we would dress at the house, and we would always be comfortable and usually just wear warm-ups. But Corny always had various Zubaz and always wore either, some kind of smart-ass saying on a T-shirt, and was particularly fond of South Park.
I killed Kenny, my best friend Kenny Bolin, growing up, motherfucker. One time, me and Kenny climbed on the roof of a house, and we decided to jump off, but then we didn't, because Kenny's a chicken shit. And he steals meat from Kroger. But, he just always dressed in these great T-shirts, and nothing like what's available over at BrucePrichard.com.
Hypothetically speaking, if instead of going on a rant about WCW and the NWO, instead, Jim Cornette was going to be on Raw promoting BrucePrichard.com and all their fine offerings over there, what might that sound like?
Hey, motherfucker, I used to be over. Now, a lot of people may think I'm an Alabama dream, but I got no job right now, and I ain't gonna use a goddamn pronoun or say dude. That's just a fucking rumor and innuendo, and I guarantee you that's not a fucking rib, because Bruce Prichard doesn't need any goddamn guests or something to wrestle with over at BrucePrichard.com. He may love you, but that doesn't mean he likes you. He wrote this shit. Well, you fucking know they ain't scared of shit, and every Friday at noon it's the goddamn main event. They love ribs 24/7, and even Dr. Tom and the goddamn heavenly bodies are represented over at BrucePrichard.com. Motherfucker! I'm fired! I used to be hired, but now I'm fired!
How much shit are you going to be in with Jim Cornette after today's show?
I love Jim Cornette. God damn it. He's my buddy, and he always has been. And we've always shared different philosophies and different opinions on the business. But at the end of the day, we agree to disagree, and we share the same fundamentals. And I love Jim Cornette for being Jim. He loves me for being Bruce. We're different people. But the one thing we have in common is our love for the business and just wanting it to continue and grow and have whatever hand we can have in it. I was happy as shit that he went back to the Hall of Fame and that he had a part because, goddammit, there was only one guy to induct the Rock and Roll Express, and that was Jim Cornette. And I thought it was so appropriate to have Jim Cornette on a WWE stage in a Hall of Fame event. And I hope to see Jim Cornette in the Hall of Fame on the WWE stage within the next few years because he deserves it.
It's got to happen next year in New Orleans with the Midnight Express. Let's get Dennis Condrey up there.
It would be apropos, yeah.
Stan Lane. Let's get Bobby Eaton. Let's get the whole gang together.
Yeah, and people can say what they want about Jimmy and his different views, and Jimmy has his views, but at the same time, Jim's a professional. He's a human being. God, Eric Bischoff. I saw Eric Bischoff at WrestleCon, and he talked about how funny it was that he was backstage at a WWE event having a conversation with Jim Cornette.
In the same room with Vince McMahon and Triple H.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Cornette to find, a common ground with Triple H and be able to talk to him and agree that what he's doing at NXT is a good thing and how great all of that is. And I just think it's tremendous that Corny, look, man, he can open up and he can be a human and he can enjoy the same shit everybody else does. And he's opinionating. He's an entertaining son of a bitch. And he's my friend and I love him to death.
And he has always been super nice to me. And he
hates you. No, he hates you.
I get that he tells you he hates me, but he's nice to me when you see him at an event, and he'll be nice to you if you see him at an event. Keep up with all things Jim Cornette over at JimCornette.com.
But don't listen to his podcast on MLW Radio Network. It drops every Wednesday, so do not listen to that, folks.
Well, he has two shows for you to enjoy, the Jim Cornette Experience and Cornette's Drive-Thru, and that logo for Cornette's Drive-Thru is fucking phenomenal. It looks like the Wendy's logo. It's outstanding.
Motherfucker, triple with cheese, extra cheese, double mayo, extra onion.
I wish it was a Dairy Queen logo, but I get it. All things Jim Cornette. Check it out, jimcornette.com. Go out of your way to check out that Midnight Express scrapbook. I know it's going to be hard to find, but fuck, it's worth it. And if you ever get an opportunity to meet Jim Cornette, man, your impressions of him as a fan that you've heard over the years are probably wrong. He could not be nicer, more engaging, funnier, wittier. He's everything you hoped he would be. Check him out at any of his live events. Go to jimcornette.com. To find all things Jim Cornette. But now let's talk about all things Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Next week, I want to do something a little different, Bruce. I want to do an in your house poll. And May 1995, long time ago, 22 years ago, that's when the very first In Your House came to be. And I want to go through a few years of In Your House. Do I have your permission to do so?
You have my permission, kind sir.
So May 14th, 1995 was the very first In Your House. How did it come to be? What was the methodology? No longer 3-hour pay-per-views, now 2-hour pay-per-views. No more 4 or 5 a year. Now it's going to be more regular. How does that go? And let's talk about what's on the card, because a lot of people will just see this and then not really research the card. I really hope you start doing that if you haven't already. Bret Hart wrestles Hakushi in the opening match. How awesome is that? Razor Ramon defeats Jeff Jarrett in the Roadie. You know what we're going to get to do there.
Spend my days working hard on the go, but the hands on the clock keep spinning too slow. I can't wait to be alone with my baby tonight.
Mabel takes on Adam Bomb. Owen and Yokozuna take on the Smoking Guns. Jerry Lawler takes on Bret Hart. And then in the main event, Diesel defends his world title against Psycho Sid. That is poll option number 1, the very first In Your House from May 1995. Let's fast forward to May 1996. This is the last time this one's going to be on the poll if it doesn't win. It's In Your House 8, Beware of Dog. Why was this one significant, Bruce?
Well, this was South Carolina, the night that the lights went out. We lost power, and we went down and had to just completely adjust, abort, and rewrite on the go. It was crazy, man.
It was an interesting show, too, a jumping off point for someone's career. What Vince sounded like when this thing happened and all the power went dark live on pay-per-view would be a fun story, but this is the last time we're going to put it on the poll for a long time if it loses. It's In Your House 8, Beware of Dog. You'll see Mark Merrow and Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Savio Vega and Steve Austin, Yokozuna and Vader, Goldust and The Undertaker, Jake Roberts and Justin Bradshaw, Shawn Michaels and the British Bulldog working in the main event. And of course, they had to retape something, so we got to hear about that. Poll option number 3 is In Your House 15. This one was called A Cold Day in Hell. Business is on the uptick a little bit. This is from May of 1997 in the Richmond Coliseum. On the card, we see Hunter Hearst Helmsley with China by this point, taking on Flash Funk. Mankind in the second match on the card, taking on Rocky Maivia. Wow, how their careers would be different in just about 18 months. The Nation of Domination is going to defeat Ahmed Johnson. That's right. Crush, Savio Vega, and Farouk all took on Ahmed Johnson in a gauntlet match because that's what everybody needs. 3 Ahmed Johnson matches
in one night.
We also got a no-holds-barred match that was pretty damn stiff with Ken Shamrock and Vader. And then in our main event, we have The Undertaker defending his world title against Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's the first time that Stone Cold headlined a pay-per-view with a world title shot here. It's In Your House 15, A Cold Day in Hell. It is poll option number 3. Last but certainly not least, it's 1998. I want to say the year again so you don't think we're talking about something else. 1998, May 31st. This is In Your House Over the Edge. This is a pretty famous show. simply because of the main event, and it was awesome. It was a Falls Count Anywhere match for the world title. Mr. McMahon was the special guest referee, and it was the coming out party for Dude Love as he would challenge Stone Cold Steve Austin for the world title. Underneath that, we would see The Nation with Owen Hart, Kama Mustafa, and D'Lo Brown. They were seconded by Mark Henry, and they would take on DX with Triple H, Billy Gunn, and Road Dogg, who would be seconded by X-Pac and Chyna. We also have a mask versus mask match with Vader and Kane. Farouk would challenge The Rock for the Intercontinental title. Kai and Tai with Dick Togo, Mins Te'o, and Sho Funaki would take on Taka Michinoku and Justin Bradshaw in a handicap match. Mark Marrow wrestles Sable. That's a real sentence. Mark Marrow wrestles Sable. Jeff Jarrett and Tennessee Lee take on Steve Blackman. And then in our curtain jerker, how awesome is this? LOD 2000 with Sonny and Droz taking on the Disciples of Apocalypse, Skull and 8-Ball with Chains. Poll option number 4 is All Things 1998, May 31st. It's Over the Edge, the final In Your House on our poll. So let's recap. We've got 4 In Your Houses on a very special In Your House poll. The very first one from May of 1995. The second one, now by the way, that one had Bret Hart and Hakushi. I don't know when we'll talk about him again. The second one, In Your House, Beware of Dog. The power goes out in the Carolinas. This is something I've wanted to talk about for a long time. Maybe it has a shot this year. The next one, poll option number 3, a no-holds-barred match and Austin in his first main event for the world title. Check it out. Cold Day in Hell is poll option number 3. Last but certainly not least, Over the Edge, poll option number 4. As we look at all of these different In Your Houses for the month of May, which one of these makes the most sense to you that you would like to cover next week?
You really have to ask that question?
It's got to be the power going out, right?
Yes.
It's got to be the power going out, but I fucking doubt it wins. Either way, we want to hear from you, and you get to shape the show. Ultimately, it's not up to us. We're campaigning like a son of a bitch, which we're probably not supposed to do, but we're not real journalists. I do mortgages.
It's our show.
Yeah, roll tide. Vote right now. It's really your show, and you can go ahead and flex that muscle over at Prichard Show. Send your hate tweets today to at Bruce Prichard. Send your love tweets to at Hey It's Conrad. We'd love to hear from you. We're both very active on Twitter. Throw us a follow and be sure to vote in our poll. And of course, support our fine sponsors, rgtforlaw.com. Of course, you need to go buy some t-shirts over at brucepritchard.com. DollarShaveClub.com is really an awesome product. Bruce, you and I have been using this for a couple of years now, or at least I have. I really do think that Dr. Carver shave butter is pretty kick-ass. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely love it.
Go check it out. DollarShaveClub.com/wrestle. $5 and you get a month's supply. The Dr. Carver shave butter is worth that alone. Go check it out. DollarShaveClub.com/wrestle. But most importantly this week, we need to thank our biggest sponsor, Audible. Audible has hooked us up with a really great deal and a great deal for our listeners, and you can go ahead and take advantage right now. You're going to get some access to a free trial, and if you're not really sure what all's on Audible, I encourage you to go join. Let me stress again, a lot of times we ask you to support our sponsors by buying something. How much does it cost to support Audible, Bruce?
Free.
It's free. If you like the show, do us a favor. Go to audible.com/Bruce. What's that address again, Bruce?
Audible.com/Bruce. And if you like to read books, but you just don't have the time because you're always on the go, Audible helps you out with that by having a book there for you when you're riding in the car that you can listen to and absorb. So go to audible.com/Bruce and start now because it's free.
We can't stress this enough. We love Audible. They're supporting the show. If you love us and you want to support us, go to audible.com/Bruce. Do it right now. And of course, if you'd like to save some money on your mortgage, what would Jim Cornette say about that?
Go to 1FMC.com, mother.
NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. We'll see you here next week on Something to Wrestle With.
Say my name, motherfucker.
Bruce Prichard.
The world of MLW Radio never stops.